Part 15. A Middle School Cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 141. Since their debut, the comics created by the duo of Ajo and Mumenha are not orthodox royal comics. In their comics, the main characters in the comics are both good and evil. Among the many royal comics on Shonen Jump, they can be considered unique. After the two of them applied to commit suicide to the editor-in-chief, the comic book had been cut in half and was in a desperate situation. Although the new comic KTM that I have been thinking about for a long time has received unanimous praise from the editorial department, if Eiji Niizuma and Makoto Takahashi are the opponents, there is no possibility of winning. Adhering to the spirit of becoming more courageous with every setback, the two continued to work hard, and finally created a new comic. As a result, they encountered the new serial The Grandson of the Slippery Man, and this time the result was even more tragic. I was brushed off before I even entered the serialization meeting. Creating comics is not an easy task, especially if it is a work that is intended to be serialized for a long time. This time, Slicker is definitely a royal comic. The person shouting can only be the yellow-haired glasses guy. After all, Landai, who has a silly existence, generally doesn't do it as long as his own voice actor girl is not involved. Would be too surprised. Become the master of demons and monsters, lines like this. What Mr. Huang Mao Glasses said is not wrong. Many hot-blooded boy comics are like this. As the protagonist, there is always a lofty goal, an ideal that is in line with the times. For example, Luffy in Up, didn't he always shout that he wanted to become the Pirate King? For another example, isn't Naruto in Naruto always saying that he wants to become Hokage? But, based on this reasoning, doesn't Yagamayu in DN always want to become a god in the New World? Sure enough, a dream that was out of step with the times led to a tragic ending. Therefore, when the attribute camps are allocated for such comics, it is very sad that they are directly classified as evil comics. Chiren, what you are wearing is. Landai looked at his good friend partner wearing sunglasses with a dark look on his face, then, the person you plan to follow today is. Previously, in order to come up with a new comic, Mr. Huang-haired glasses took his best friend and conducted an evil stalking of Uncle Hattori, the sea urchin who had been taking care of the two of them. Although the original goal was achieved, it is undeniable that this kind of thing has made the two of them a little addicted. Although Landai looked helpless, he still changed his equipment in time and looked at his good friend expectantly. Today's target is the guy next door. A trace of expectation flashed in the eyes of the man with yellow hair and glasses, and his hand unconsciously rubbed the sparse stubble on his chin, with a weird smile on his face. It must be interesting. And I heard before that Aiken, that guy, has something to do today, so, hee. Therefore, the Ajumu-Menha group changed their jobs from cartoonists to hidden professional tail walkers, and the job transfer mission began. Unlike before when he went out, Takahashi Makoto was holding Ruri in his arms today, while Sadaharu was left at home to carry out escort work. Because he is still wearing a white coat, Yachin Mumenjai has no worries about getting lost. After all, these days, there are not many people wearing white coats wandering around. In addition, the logo with the words Demon King on the back of Makoto Takahashi's white coat is really eye-catching. Unlike Hattori, who had been following the tailing sea urchin before, the two people who had already had experience were naturally more skilled and bolder than last time. Maintaining a distance of about 20 meters, the two of them followed Takahashi Makoto openly, completely forgetting the cautious attitude they had when tailgating for the first time. Maybe it's because the person being followed is a middle-class manga artist named Takahashi Makoto. Arriving at Goko's park, Takahashi Makoto suddenly stopped, and Yachin Mumenjai, who was following behind, naturally hid beside the flower bed not far away. Although there was a certain distance between them, the distance was just right. While not being discovered, it also ensures that the sound can be heard. It's me. I've arrived at the agreed upon location. No stalkers have been observed for the time being. Makoto Takahashi took out his mobile phone and didn't know who he was talking to. He kept scanning the surroundings and the conversation did not end. Then, please, great, the representative of the leader of the alliance testified that the Apostle Phoenix Academy is really serious and the rebellion plan has been launched. Follow my people, the time for rebellion has come. The power of wave guidance exists in my heart. Follow my call and gather around me. After putting down the phone, Takahashi Makoto put Liuli at his feet. Shouted loudly, my believers, my followers, the day of holy war has come, show up. The passers-by who happened to pass by were completely speechless at Takahashi Makoto's stupid behavior, shook their heads and left with a sigh. As for Aiken Mumenjai, who was hiding aside and watched the whole process, he suppressed his laughter and covered his mouth to try not to make any noise. Just as the two of them expected, after Takahashi Makoto's speech ended, there was only a cold wind blowing, and there was no sign of any heaven and earth phenomena. Makoto Takahashi did not feel embarrassed, but burst into laughter exclusive to junior high school students. As Takahashi Makoto's laughter rang out, the dense grass in the park began to shake. However, Ajumu-menha, who was hiding and peeping at the side, had his mouth twitching wildly this time, and could not feel anything funny at all, because there was a magical scene appeared. Cats, lots of cats appeared. With Takahashi Makoto as the center, cats with different fur colors began to gather from all directions. The current number has exceeded 30, and this number is still rising. The most terrifying thing for Yachen Mumenjai is that after these cats appeared, they actually formed a queue by themselves, and lined up in front of Takahashi Makoto in a square formation, without any noise. It's a lie, they were so surprised that they couldn't speak a complete sentence. The two of them looked at this shocking scene and looked at each other. This number, this scale, now Yachen Mumenjai and the two of them have begun to doubt whether Takahashi Makoto's body is human. This kind of thing. It's not that he suddenly awakened a talent and skills to communicate with animals, nor that he mastered the special ability to communicate with cats. The reason why he can reach this level is that whenever Takahashi Makoto is free, he will buy a lot of milk and cat food and come to this park to recruit a lot of cats. Even Takahashi Makoto's magic pet Liuli was recruited here. By the way, this behavior seems to have lasted for several years. As usual, after the food was distributed, Takahashi Makoto continued to educate the cat army in cuteness as usual, using Liuli as an example to teach the cat army how to be cute and how to act like a spoiled child. This behavior made the Yachen Mumenjai duo on the side stunned. Of course, the remarks such as using cuteness to conquer humans and taking cuteness as justice to the end, making humans completely captives of cats also made the two people's mouths twitch wildly. An hour later, the pale-faced Yachen Mumenjai continued to follow Takahashi Makoto's movement. The reason why they were pale was because they were attacked by the cuteness of the cat army. It is common sense in the world to be pale when attacked by mental attacks, and it is also a matter of course. The most important thing for stalking is courage, especially when the target is a terminal patient of the second-year disease. This kind of place. Landai looked at the yellow-haired glasses man beside him with a blushing face, and asked hesitantly, Akito, what should we do? Should we follow in? If Adu-san knew. If Zionjai knew, I would definitely be beaten to death. The yellow-haired glasses man was also hesitant, and his face was also a little scared. After lowering his head and thinking for a moment, he gritted his teeth and said, no matter what, let's follow in. But at least, this matter must not be known to Zionjai, otherwise. The place that made the two people hesitate was a special cafe. Most of the waiters in it were maids, cat-eared girls, magical girls, and the like. That's right, this cafe is the legendary cosplay cafe. As mentioned before, because of the influence of the legendary title White One-Eyed Dragon, Takahashi Makoto has been blacklisted by many cafes, but this cafe is not among them. Landai and the yellow-haired glasses man entered the cafe with blushing faces. After all, for the innocent duo, the waiters inside were dressed too hot. Even the married man with yellow hair and glasses was uncomfortable in such a scene. As expected, both Yachin and Mumenjai were pure and innocent. But what surprised them was that when Takahashi Makoto came to the store, he was not playing any naughty games with the waiter here, but was talking to a handsome middle-aged uncle. After choosing a seat close to them, Yachin and Mumenjai changed their jobs, from stalking maniacs to eavesdropping maniacs. It's just as you said. The coffee provided in this shop is instant coffee. Instant coffee is indeed the greatest invention in the world. The handsome middle-aged uncle took a sip of coffee and showed a satisfied expression on his face. After sighing for a while, he looked at Takahashi Makoto with some doubts. So what do you want to talk to me about this time, Fengguangai Yuan classmate? Just some questions about the science side. Takahashi Makoto tapped the table with his fingers, and his face showed an expectant look. First of all, it's about the operating principle of the electromagnetic gun. Although I know a little about this, I still want to ask the experts for their opinions. Electromagnetic gun? The operating principle is. For the one-eyed boy in front of him wearing a white coat, the middle-aged uncle was silent for a moment and began to talk about it. Yachin Mumenjai, who was eavesdropping over there, said that he couldn't understand the communication on the science side at all. However, for this middle-aged uncle, the yellow-haired glasses guy always felt that he was familiar, as if he had seen him somewhere before. Thank you very much, Professor. Takahashi Makoto put down the pen in his hand and showed a satisfied smile on his face. Then the next question is about vector control. Then it's about ignoring the rules of three-dimensional space and teleporting. Then it's about the experiment of copying the human body. Finally, it's about the composition of parallel worlds and the theory of world line convergence. Schrödinger theory and the verification of time paradox. The charm of the middle-aged professor is off the charts. The waiters are already looking at the professor, who is talking with mysterious loving eyes. Also receiving attention was Makoto Takahashi, who was wearing a white coat and an eye patch. After all, this cafe is famous for cosplay, and the characters from comics and animations are naturally familiar to them. Makoto Takahashi has obvious chubby characteristics and often visits this cafe. Many waiters already know Takahashi. Sincerely, your career as a cartoonist. But the current scene, there is no doubt about it. This coffee shop has been taken over by the science side. As a cartoonist, Cheng, why did you choose such a weird place to talk about very rigorous scientific issues with a professor who looks very professional? The Yachin Mumenjai combination, whose synchronization rate reached the maximum value in an instant, while silently complaining in their hearts, was ready to give up today's trailing operation. Well, that's it. It seems that what I learned before was indeed not detailed enough. Makoto Takahashi put down the pen in his hand, rubbed his sore fingers, and showed a pleasant smile on his face. Professor, thank you very much. The information you provided for the association. In this way, the most critical part of my plan has been completed. I remember you told me before that you are a cartoonist, right? Professor Uncle frowned slightly, and then seemed to remember something, and asked Takahashi Makoto curiously, Phoenix Academy student, you are asking these, is it? Are you planning to draw it into a comic? Of course. This will become an epoch-making chapter, one that will make the world kneel down. Makoto Takahashi raised his head proudly, looking at the curious uncle professor with a grateful smile on his face. Professor, I will send the booklet to you as a thank you gift. Comics? Although I don't like it very much, but... Professor Uncle showed an expectant look. According to your previous questions, there are quite a few scientific issues involved. Such comics, maybe, will be very interesting. In order to create new comics, he went to professionals for consultation. Is this what Cheng did? Over there, Yachin Mumanjai was completely shocked after learning the truth. It's really stupid to follow the murderer of Takesigo Phoenix Academy. Takahashi Makoto looked at Ajumu who left silently, and sent some of the photos of her sex that were misplaced and secretly taken on her phone to 2 mailboxes. With an expectant smile on his face, then, in exchange, I will accept your lives. A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 142. The lives of Yachin Mumenjai and others were not taken away. Although Takahashi Makoto wanted to throw an apple to attract a certain foodie death god, this kind of thing is basically impossible to do. Of course, the good friends duo went out to fool around with their girlfriends and wives behind their backs. After the truth was revealed, the corresponding punishment was still inevitable. For example, Landai stood on the balcony in the middle of the night and explained to his voice actor girlfriend Ada for 3 hours, and the stuttering silence took up about an hour and a half. For another example, Huang Mao Glasses tried to explain but was severely beaten by the violent girl. After that, he came to the good friend's studio in the middle of the night with a bruised face and brought camping-related items, begging for a place to stay. Because of the bullying by the leader of the evil party, Makoto Takahashi, who dared not retaliate and could only swallow his anger, Aho Mumanai is now actively working on creating a new comic, and Fukuda, who was also strongly stimulated by the cartoonist Feng Guangai Yuankuma, decided to learn from Feng Guangai Yuankuma, while maintaining the serialization, submit a new short story, and try to serialize it in the weekly magazine at the same time. As the culprit, Makoto Takahashi may have accumulated too many causal points before, or the curse behind some people has begun to take effect. Recently, he has been a little, well, very unsuccessful in comics. For example, Full Metal Alchemist, and Full Metal Alchemist. So Yoshida showed a solemn expression on his face after getting the results of the reader survey. After observing for 2 whole months, Yoshida decided not to be patient anymore. Since it has come to this point, he naturally needs to go to Takahashi Makoto to have a good talk. According to the results, Nura and Inuyasha have always maintained the top 5 rankings. This momentum of catching up from behind makes Yoshida very happy. But when Yoshida saw the results of Full Metal Alchemist, he couldn't be happy at all, because apart from the content of the previous episode where Kimberly appeared, which won the first place due to the character's personality and the anti-war plot, the results of Full Metal Alchemist during this period began to decline continuously. Although there was an upward trend in the middle, and it once returned to the top 3, the results in the past month have been declining. The content of the previous episode has even dropped to the 8th place. Yoshida remembered very clearly that the editor-in-chief is the kind of person who does what he says. Before, Makoto Takahashi and the editor-in-chief agreed that if the 3 comics were serialized at the same time, they would remain in the top 10. Although it seems that Nura and Inuyasha have no problems in the near future, Full Metal Alchemist is already on the edge of a precarious cliff. According to this downward trend, Yoshida is sure that once the results of Full Metal Alchemist drop to 10th place, the editor-in-chief will definitely fulfill his previous words and directly cut off the 2 works of Makoto Takahashi. Although the editor-in-chief did not say a word after learning about this result, but just put on the appearance of Commander Hasegawa, Yoshida has already guessed the editor-in-chief's mind. It is indeed too much of a stretch to let a cartoonist serialize 3 comics at the same time. But he has obtained the right to serialize 3 comics at the same time, and Takahashi Makoto is a cartoonist under his command. Yoshida can't always complain about Takahashi Makoto with the catchphrase "you deserve it" that he usually complains about others. So Yoshida, who was extremely anxious, could only quickly go to Takahashi Makoto to discuss the subsequent development of Full Metal Alchemist and try to find a way out of the current predicament together. Dude, hello, Yoshida. After being strictly brainwashed by Takahashi Makoto, Yoshi-chan Mayuri has now completed a true transformation. With an innocent smile on his face, he habitually tilted his head to say hello, and the already foul Mensha technique made Yoshida fall into a trance. "Hello, you," Yoshida's tongue began to interrupt, and a rare shyness appeared on his face. Mayuri uses the art of cute killing to prove that cuteness is justice and cuteness is truth. In this era of plugins, being cute is indeed a way of survival. Huh? My cat, this weird uncle's look, the expression of begging for a whip is. Takahashi Makoto pulled Mayuri behind him and looked at Yoshida with a smile. Sure enough, behind every S who looks like a black belly, there is an M attribute that is looking forward to being slaughtered. At this time, Chen, are you still in the mood to joke with me? As usual, Yoshida would argue with Makoto Takahashi's words. But when he thought of the recent crisis, he sighed helplessly, took out the data he had collected in the past 2 months from his bag, and handed it to Makoto Takahashi. Take a look for yourself. Is this a conspiracy of the organization? Or a trap? Makoto Takahashi pinched the paper with his thumb and index finger, and showed his super high awareness of prevention in Yoshida's surprised expression. There is no letter in the letter. Facing the light, he carefully observed the thickness of the paper and confirmed that it was just ordinary paper. No special smell, colorless and tasteless poison. He put the letter under his nose, sniffed it gently, and then took out a silver needle from the pocket of the white coat and gently rotated it on the paper. The silver needle did not change color, confirming that it was non-toxic. The next step is burning. Flooding. Oil soaking. When Yoshida was already crazy, Takahashi Makoto suddenly looked enlightened. Wait, at this time, I know, it can only be seen with blood, right? Ji-chong, go prepare the kitchen knife, prepare to kill my cat. Sorry, I got the wrong one. Only then did Yoshida notice that what Takahashi Makoto was holding was a blank piece of paper. He immediately rummaged through his backpack again and found the previously counted data. After confirming that it was correct, he handed it to Takahashi Makoto again. Chen, the current situation of Full Metal Alchemist seems to be a bit delicate. Tisk. You said you could taste it tonight. Stir-fried cat's paws. Yoshida's unwilling tone made his mouth twitch wildly, and he subconsciously took several steps back to keep a distance from Takahashi Makoto. Although he knew that Takahashi Makoto was joking, Yoshida really felt a chill coming from behind. Is this the legendary killing intent? That being said, after Takahashi Makoto got the statistical data, he fell into a long silence. Because he lowered his head, Yoshida could not judge Takahashi Makoto's expression, but he thought Takahashi Makoto should be. I feel the hostility of this twisted world towards me. Sure enough, it is not anyone who obstructs my existence, but the great will of this world itself. Has the strength of the organization reached the level that can interfere with the great will of the world? It seems that I really underestimated the strength of the organization before. With a serious expression, he said such words, and Yoshida's expectant expression collapsed instantly. Speaking of the poor performance of comics, does it have anything to do with the great will of the world? But then again, Takahashi Makoto is not worried about the performance of Full Metal Alchemist during this period. After all, Takahashi Makoto had already thought of such a result from the beginning. Readers of Shonen Jump prefer mainstream comics, especially hot-blooded youth-type battle comics. However, the content of the Full Metal Alchemist series during this period is completely in the layout stage. There are not many battle scenes, and the entire comic is full of strategies and calculations of the characters from all sides. In the comics, Makoto Takahashi has shown the plans of the characters of the two hostile parties through serialization. At the beginning, such content gave many readers a sense of urgency and expectation, but as time went by, the battle plot that many readers were looking forward to has never come. Although many readers have become accustomed to Makoto Takahashi's style of suspense, after expectations turned into despair again and again, readers can no longer bear it. Sister, since there is still a long time before the real war, don't create such a sense of urgency. This is the inner complaint of many readers. The content of each episode seems to be planning something, but in fact, after reading the content of one episode, there is no fight. Isn't this a pitfall? However, compared to the legendary duel between masters, it is better to observe each other face to face and remain silent for a long time. At least in the comics, there are still various verbal battles. The retribution for constantly setting traps to kill readers is the decline in the manga rankings. This is an equal exchange, and this is the choice of Steins Gate. Tisk, at this time. Looking at the name of Black Flame King displayed on the phone, Takahashi Makoto frowned. Shouldn't it be voluntary surrender, but, could it be that the organization has already killed the Black Flame King in advance? How can it be repaired? Where is the script of joining forces to meet the enemy and burn down Red Cliff? Director, please read the file. Phoenix Academy teacher. The tone on the other side sounded very calm, as if something was brewing, but... I got the first attack. My turn, draw a card. According to the rules of a certain card game, Takahashi Makoto took the initiative directly. Looking at Yoshida, who was holding his forehead and speechless, he laughed wildly. Ha 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 ha, I drew Lao Etu. At this moment, because the cards in my hand gathered all the pieces of Master Hu Lai, so, Tien Hu. I won. It was really an interesting duel. Speaking of Takahashi Makoto, Tien Hu Lao Ai, you definitely didn't shuffle the cards, right? Can the plug-in be more obvious? Is the recently serialized Full Metal Alchemist planning to be famous for something? Nazuma Eiji said in a deep voice, breaking through Chuyuni's defense. Was it the surprise of being told what was on his mind, or the embarrassment of being broken? Takahashi Makoto instantly fell into a state of aphasia. After a long silence, he laughed wildly with a full of Chuyuni, ha 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 ha, as expected of the Black Flame King. It seems that you have already noticed it? Is it so? Like Takahashi Makoto, Nazuma Eiji, who also belongs to the intuitive school, has mastered the predictive ability of comics that is almost cheating. Hearing Takahashi Makoto's answer, he naturally answered happily, I would rather let the comics rank down than spend a lot of content on layout. It's really the style that Feng Guangyuan teacher is good at. Recently, it seems that Crow won very easily. It seems that in the future. Easy? Humph, holding such feelings, Black Flame King, are you too sweet? Since it has been seen through, there is no need to hide. Following Yajo Mumanjai and the silver-haired boy Fukuda, Takahashi Makoto once again used the provocation skill on the Black Flame King. As you said, the promised day has come, cherish the last two chances. Because after 2 rounds, I will become the god who dominates Shonen Jump. The meaning he wanted to convey was already very clear, and without giving the other party time to reply, Takahashi Makoto hung up the phone directly. Ah Chen, are you saying? It turns out that the reason why the ranking of Full Metal Alchemist has dropped recently is that someone did it on purpose. Yoshida realized belatedly that he was deceived by Makoto Takahashi again. Speaking of his previous worries, Yoshida was furious and mad. Didn't I say it before? While giving the enemy hope, give appropriate despair. This is the so-called truth. Full Metal Alchemist, which has been ignored recently, is the strongest killer of my Phoenix inner Kishin. Ha ha ha. While Makoto Takahashi was laughing wildly, he also showed a bit of regret on his face, but this time the King of Black Flame actually realized it in advance. The leak of information, is it really an organized traitor? Ah Chen, you are a complete S. Yoshida repeatedly complained about what Makoto Takahashi did, but, what is the feeling of being targeted like a prey? Say, my cat, you who know the truth. A dangerous smile, this is the expression of the one-eyed Makoto Takahashi at this time. He bluntly said something that made Yoshida's heart beat faster, do you choose to be tortured to death, or do you choose to be tortured to death? After hearing the two options, Yoshida's three-part rant was triggered again. Choose your sister. Aren't these the same choices? Why do you have to be tortured to death after knowing the truth? After many cartoonists who were named before, Editor-in-Chief Yoshida was once again selected as the target of provocation. Takahashi Makoto once again proved that he has reached the peak of his own death, and no one can stop him. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A middle school cartoonist. Author, MaleProtagonist. Email. Chapter 143. Taiwan Novel Network Rightward Arrow. At this serialization meeting, the new serialization submitted by Ashiro Mumanjai can be described as a blockbuster. Although Takahashi Makoto has been emphasizing that he is just a plagiarist, these comics are just works from a parallel world. Yoshida naturally doesn't believe such a statement. In Yoshida's view, he is also a talented cartoonist like Nazuma Eiji. But Ashiro Mumanjai, ever since Ashiro Mumanjai mustered up the courage to accept the harsh conditions and took the initiative to cut off his comics, Yoshida has felt the huge potential of the two-person combination. Just like this serialization meeting. The new comic submitted by Ashiro Mumanjai amazed even Yoshida, who has always been picky. The editors who attended the serialization meeting were full of praise for this comic, and basically voted unanimously to approve this new serialization. Although the editor-in-chief raised some negative opinions in the middle, the final result was to agree to let Yoshiro Mumanjai's comic go into serialization directly from next week. Just after the serialization meeting, Yoshida walked out of Urangsha with a very ugly face. In the last week of December, because of Christmas, the streets seemed to be completely surrounded by festive joy. However, it was completely incompatible with the festive atmosphere on the street. Without welcoming the festive joy, Yoshida's eyebrows were full of tangled expressions. The ranking of Full Metal Alchemist in the previous episode was 8th. Starting next week, with the addition of new comics, the ranking may drop again, you will inform Takahashi Makoto. If it really drops to 10th place, then, the agreement to cut off 2 works. This was the editor-in-chief who deliberately asked Yoshida to stay after the serialization meeting, and had a short conversation alone. Yoshida, who was immersed in the comics of Yoshiro Mumanjai, was instantly frightened and broke out in a cold sweat. That guy Ah-Chen, is really courting death this time. Recalling the look on the editor's face when he spoke, Yoshida's previous good mood was gone. Although Takahashi Makoto said before that Full Metal Alchemist will counterattack after 2 episodes, just like Higurashi, but now Yoshida can't believe it at all. If the ranking drops to 10th place in the next 2 episodes, don't even think about counterattack, just collect the corpse directly. Before today, Yoshida was still full of confidence, looking forward to Takahashi Makoto's super reversal operation, but after the serialization meeting, Yoshida has begun to consider the option of having the work cut off at that time. Aiken, this is really not the time to joke around. If you can't keep your position in the top 10 in the next chapter, 2 of the comics you are drawing will definitely be cut by the editor. Although it was Christmas, Yoshida, who was still in a bad mood, gave earnest advice to Takahashi Makoto on the other end of the phone. Please, at least think of a way to make the comics more interesting. Draw some content that readers expect, such as battles between alchemists. My beloved cat, this time you didn't choose to desert and betray Phoenix Court Kima, which is a cause for celebration. As a reward for your persistence and perseverance, this time I will let you witness the miraculous promised day. On the other end of the phone, Takahashi Makoto still had an indifferent tone, which made Yoshida very angry. It was already a time of urgency, and he still had to keep the rhythm of being a middle school student to death. Aiken, have you ever thought about it? If Tisk. Heroes always appear at the most critical moment. If they don't appear at the critical moment, how can the value of heroes be shown? What a bastard logic. Yoshida was ready to smash the phone. My beloved cat, I don't want to say the same thing twice. As a pet, your attitude is too arrogant. I know. With a helpless sigh, Yoshida hung up the phone and turned to the nearby shrine. Instead of pinning hopes on Takahashi Makoto, a guy who is courting death, it is better to pray devoutly to the illusory god. Maybe a miracle will really happen. After the new issue of Shonen Jump was released, Yoshida has fallen into the abyss of despair. The truth is even more cruel than Yoshida imagined, because Yoshida's attention has always been on Yashiro Mumanai, and he ignored the existence of some cartoonists. This week's ranking is Yoshida, who had closed his eyes tightly before, slowly opened his eyes, suppressed his fear and anxiety, and took a sneak peek at the statistics of this week. After seeing the results of Full Metal Alchemist, he finally breathed a sigh of relief. 9th. Sure enough, just as the editor-in-chief said, after the serialization of Yashiro Mumanjai's new comic, it directly won the first place. All the previously ranked comics dropped one place. Full Metal Alchemist, which was ranked 8th last time, dropped directly to 9th place this time. However, Yoshida is very satisfied with this result. After all, it is still in the top 10. According to Makoto Takahashi, starting from the next episode of Full Metal Alchemist, it will enter the rhythm of reversal. However, Yoshida has always been skeptical about Makoto Takahashi's statement. Speaking of Makoto Takahashi's confident attitude, it is impossible to believe it. It is said that reversal can be reversed, and it is said that reversal can be reversed. According to the situation that Yoshida has mastered, Makoto Takahashi seems to have not mastered such a brutal ability. After getting the comic ranking, Yoshida rushed to Makoto Takahashi's house almost immediately. But when Yoshida arrived at Takahashi Makoto's house, he found a group of guests who arrived earlier than him. They were the Ajomumha duo, who had already arrived at the same time as Hattori and Minotaur. "Why are you here, Hattori?" There was no need to ask more questions for Ashiro Mumanjai and Minotaur, but Yoshida was completely surprised by the appearance of the sea urchin-headed Hattori. "Well, there are some special reasons." He. With an obvious cover-up, Hattori grabbed his head and smiled foolishly without caring. He, sister. Is Ashiro Mumanjai's success this time really because of your advice behind the scenes? Yoshida immediately realized the truth. Yoshida's arrival made Ashiro Mumanjai and the editor duo, who were too excited, gradually calm down. After the greetings, they left silently. The four of them could see that Yoshida was going to discuss comics with Makoto Takahashi, so it was naturally inconvenient to continue to disturb him. The next episode of Full Metal Alchemist, Aiken, have you finished drawing it? After getting Makoto Takahashi's confirmation, Yoshida's eyes flashed with worry. To be honest, in this situation, it is difficult for Yoshida to imagine the content of the next episode and how to achieve a comeback. My cats, remember the time when this miracle was born today? Takahashi Makoto held the comic manuscript, with a fanatical look on his face. Let the blue ant see the imprisoned world. One of the inherent barriers of Phoenix Court Kuma, time freeze, is activated. If Full Metal Alchemist has been laying out before, then the content of this episode, as Takahashi Makoto said before, has begun to enter the time of breaking through. The content of the previous serialization was narrated by the Edward brothers separately. On the eve of the arrival of the promised day, Winry returned to her hometown in Lisenberg, but unexpectedly reunited with Ed. This is the content on Edward's side. Al, who secretly came to the east with Miles, suddenly felt that his soul seemed to be pulled back to his original body in the hiding place. As the interval between this feeling is getting shorter and shorter, Al feels quite uneasy. This is the content on Al's side. At the beginning of this episode, it tells about Al who sneaked in secretly and was discovered by Gratny. Although Al tried to resist and escape, his soul was pulled by his body again, and finally Al fell into a coma and was captured by the son of the president, The arrogant pride named Salim, who was actually the first android. Huh? Didn't they continue to explain Al? Seeing Al being captured at the beginning of the comic, Yoshida was a little worried. He was looking forward to the content later, but he saw that the content of the comic later switched directly to the military exercise. This kind of transfer method often appears in the recent Full Metal Alchemist. At the beginning, Yoshida was not very used to it, but now he has gradually adapted to it. The way of narrating the comics separately and alternating the main line makes Full Metal Alchemist look a bit confusing because of the weekly serialization. This is also one of the reasons for the decline in popularity of Full Metal Alchemist. However, starting from the content of this episode, the people on the side of the protagonist Edward will gather together, so the seemingly scattered main line will gradually gather together. The subsequent plot development shocked Yoshida. In the comics, the president who was watching the military exercise seemed to have noticed something was wrong and was about to return early. As a result, on the way to the ghost zone, the train he was riding exploded. The president's whereabouts are unknown. As an artificial president, he has super swordsmanship and is nominally the president who rules the entire country. As an enemy, whether in terms of strength or justice, he is the most difficult existence for Edward and others. Yoshida had considered before, how to destroy this artificial man. Although it was vaguely revealed in the previous comics that Mustang and the Northern Queen Army and others were all calculating the president, but, a direct explosion and then an unknown whereabouts, such a plot is really unexpected. Aiken, this president will not die just like this. It is speculated that the president should not be dead, but just hiding. Although thinking so, Yoshida couldn't help asking. If the president really died like this, then Yoshida would definitely let Takahashi Makoto change the plot. The androids set before were so powerful that they were almost immortal. If the president, one of the androids, died like this, it would be completely inconsistent with the previous setting. For the contradictions in the comics, it is natural to negotiate with the original author. This is one of the responsibilities of an editor. Tisk tisk tisk, my cat, don't you find a problem? Takahashi Makoto showed a weird smile on his face. Among all the androids, why is only the president getting old? Did the president die? Yoshida frowned and was completely confused by Takahashi Makoto's words. Looking at the weird smile on Takahashi Makoto's face, Yoshida was suddenly shocked. Could the character of the president really die because of the train explosion? The android died in a car accident. A middle school cartoonist. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 144. Regarding the life and death of the president, although Yoshida was very concerned about it, in the end he still did not get any information from Takahashi Makoto. Is this really possible? According to Yoshida's idea, in order to reverse the current unfavorable situation, Takahashi Makoto should deliberately add some battle content between alchemists. But after reading the content of this episode, Yoshida could not understand Takahashi Makoto's thoughts at all. If this continues, let alone maintaining the current ranking, the content of this episode will definitely drop to the 10th place or later. My beloved cat, your simple and ignorant brain is decaying just like this world. Makoto Takahashi looked at Yoshida, who had an expression of "I won't leave until I ask clearly," put down the brush in his hand, and turned around. He turned around and looked at Yoshida, and he pointed out the key points of the reversal with a sudden burst of blood. A single move can affect the whole body. Don't you even understand this superficial truth? My beloved cat, you are indeed as rotten as this one, with no value in your existence. But Yoshida wanted to refute, but after seeing the manga manuscript handed over by Makoto Takahashi, he looked confused. This is... They are really simple creatures. But for humans, this is natural. Makoto Takahashi looked disdainful. My beloved cat, have you forgotten Al's identity in the comics? Full Metal Alchemist Edward's younger brother, and then... Then what? Yoshida couldn't go on. Because Takahashi Makoto covered his forehead with a speechless expression, it was obvious that he was not satisfied with this answer. The human pillar that opened the door? The steel-armored humanoid? Improve your IQ and evolve into a more advanced existence, maybe even Kyubei can't do this kind of thing. Makoto Takahashi grabbed the manga manuscript and threw it on the table. Al is the protagonist. Side characters, do you understand? I know Al is the protagonist, but... Yoshida answered honestly, looking at Makoto Takahashi innocently, I still don't understand. My beloved cat, what about your super analytical ability as the editor in charge? What about your strength as my beloved? Logically speaking, even if you are reincarnated 100 times, even if you are brainwashed by the organization and change your personality to abuse animals, this kind of almost instinctive thing should not be forgotten. Makoto Takahashi looked at Yoshida and turned on the unlimited ridicule mode, while also starting to explain, let's give a simple example. For example, the heroine in the comic is about to be humiliated by someone who is hostile to the hero, but the content of the serialization is just right until the heroine lies on the bed with a face of despair. What do you think? Will the plot touch the hearts of readers? If you really draw this kind of plot, then there is no doubt that you are seeking death, Yoshida complained with black lines on his face, and his body shook involuntarily. It seems that some kind of restricted scene has been imagined. But complaints are complaints, Yoshida still understood what Takahashi Makoto wanted to say. After all, as one of the main characters in the manga, Al's popularity has always been very high, and Yoshida knows this. But in this sentence, Al was caught. As Makoto Takahashi said, after Al was caught, readers are really looking forward to the subsequent development. But regarding the president, Yoshida carefully asked his doubts, and what he received was naturally the strong contempt of Makoto Takahashi. Now, my beloved cat, do you know what is evenly matched? Do you know what is evenly matched? After deliberately saying it twice, Takahashi Makoto shook his head helplessly, kill the enemy forces without any injuries. What's the point of that kind of comic? You might as well read a certain Aotian-style novel. That kind of comic is like mowing grass with domineering unparalleled, although it is very interesting at times, but I don't like it. I don't plan to draw it either. It's an insult to metal to have such an idea. My dependent cat, are you sure you have already thought of your last words? Perhaps because he was too worried, Yoshida, who is usually calm and sinister, was completely crushed by Makoto Takahashi this time, whether it was about the plot of the comic or his IQ. Soon, the new issue of Shounen Jump will be released. Unlike Makoto Takahashi, who was full of confidence, Yoshida was now on tenterhooks, with worry evident on his face. Even a casual glance from the editor would make Yoshida subconsciously feel uneasy. This kind of fearful life, looks like it will continue for a long time. In just 5 days, Yoshida, who was living in torment, could hardly hold on any longer. On the day when the manga results came out, Yoshida grabbed it immediately and looked at the manga that ranked first. As expected, it was not Steel. While Yoshida was a little disappointed, he also felt that it was natural. After all, getting first place is not an easy thing. Even talented cartoonists like Takahashi Makoto and Eiji Niizuma cannot get first place every time. 6th. I'm finally out of the danger of being cut in half. At this rate, maybe I can breathe a sigh of relief. In the past few weeks, after relaxing my tense nerves, I felt surprisingly tired. Yoshida, who originally planned to go to Takahashi Makoto's house to read the next episode, now just wants to go home and have a good sleep. As Makoto Takahashi said, in Shonen Jump, which is a mainstream manga, the frequency of plots of torturing the protagonist is not very high, but once it appears, readers can't help but worry. This is one of the strategies to attract readers, and it is also a good way to improve the ranking. However, when using this strategy, you must make sure that the target is a manga of the mainstream type, and there must be a reversal plot afterwards. Heartbreaking plots can be there, but it is not okay to torture readers to the point of breaking their hearts. Of course, if it is a manga that is simply used to torture readers, you don't have to worry about this problem. Many fans of Full Metal Alchemist felt a heart-wrenching feeling after seeing Al being captured. After all, Al, who always appears as a younger brother in the comics, is a very mature and sensible existence in both thought and behavior, and is deeply loved by readers. Because they like him, they don't want him to be hurt. After the content of this episode was released, many readers believed that Al would definitely get out of this predicament later. Therefore, they are naturally looking forward to the content of the next episode. Because it is full of waiting and belief, according to the simple theory of relativity, every minute and every second of a short week is so difficult for readers. Just like what Makoto Takahashi said, a single move affects the whole body. The previous serialization content layout components are mostly, and there are few descriptions of battles, which really makes many readers unhappy. Many readers do not really hate Full Metal Alchemist, but are a little dissatisfied with the recent plot, so the popularity ranking naturally drops. Because the love is deep, the blame is severe. However, as in the previous episode, Al was arrested, and the president of the android disappeared because of the train explosion. Even readers with big nerves can feel from such a plot that the final decisive battle is about to begin. Since the highly anticipated plot has begun, it also indicates that the battle will become very intense later. Since Full Metal Alchemist has completed the layout and entered the moment of breaking through, how can the readers who have always supported Full Metal Alchemist give up this comic that they have always supported? Give someone a rose, and your hand will remain fragrant. So after the new issue of Shonen Jump was released, it was sold out in many bookstores in just one morning. Many readers were very resentful about not being able to buy the new issue, so the phone storm once again implemented a surprise attack on the editorial department. Among these calls, 80% were from fans of Full Metal Alchemist. In the new episode, Edward finally reunited with his father Hohenheim in Kanema. Before the agreed day, Hohenheim finally told Edward the secret of his body. When many readers saw this, they recalled the previous serial content, and many readers were speechless. For Edward and his brothers who were struggling to find the Philosopher's Stone, I'm afraid they never thought that their father was a human-shaped Philosopher's Stone. This is the Philosopher's Stone you want, do you want to use it? Don't be ridiculous. That's the lives of people who have nothing to do with it. Edward naturally refused as the readers expected. We lost our bodies because of the mistakes we made. How could we use them? After that, Edward naturally became a model of tsundere. He obviously cared about his father Hohenheim, but he said something like only by joining forces can we win and defeat that bearded uncle. This textbook tsundere made many readers laugh and feel happy for the easing of the relationship between the stupid father and son. Grandma Binako asked me to convey my mother's last words. When Edward spoke, only a back figure appeared in the comics. Mom said, "I'm sorry for not keeping the promise. I'm leaving first." After hearing this, Hohenheim burst into tears. Although it was just a comic draft, many readers felt a little sour when they saw this. Although the Uncle Hohenheim is an immortal existence, this also means that he has to bear the pain of the death of his loved ones and relatives. Although the comics do not mention how many times Hohenheim has endured such things, looking at Hohenheim's tearful face, one can imagine that he must have endured such pain many times over the years. Perhaps this is the price to be paid for immortality. Dorothy, I'm leaving. In the memory, Hohenheim made a swing for the Edward brothers at dawn before leaving home, and made a promise to his wife with a serious face, "Wait for me." "I'll wait for you," with a sad expression. After a moment of silence, Dorothy smiled and replied to Hohenheim. The comic manuscript with only one page made Full Metal Alchemist instantly enter the warm route. As Hohenheim's memories unfolded, many readers who had been patient finally couldn't help it. Sure enough, memories are all fouls. Especially afterwards, Uncle Hohenheim's monologue made his charm value instantly explode. Even though we can't grow old together, you still believe that I will follow. Holding the family photo, Hohenheim showed a look of relief on his face. Tomorrow, Dolicha. Readers who originally planned to watch the battle were a little dissatisfied at first, but with the warm content of this episode, they felt satisfied. According to the bad taste of Feng Guangai Yuan Kuma, readers who thought that this episode of Full Metal Alchemist would end here, found that the content of this episode did not end here. Just when Edward and others were about to set out to destroy the plan of the little man in the flask, Al, who was previously captured by Pride, appeared unexpectedly. After learning that his brother was controlled by Pride, Edward did not fall into impatience as before, but joined forces with his partners to try to save the controlled Al. But the enemy is not only Pride, the android, but also the somewhat cute Gratoni. Then the content of this episode ends here. After learning that they will have to go through another week of suffering, many readers began to shout the name of calcium oxide and a certain beast. After this, readers have learned a valuable lesson again. Cartoonist Feng Guangai Yuan Kuma still has the same bad taste as always. A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 145. Although the bad taste of Feng Guangai Yuan Xiongzhen has made many readers hate it, as the content of these two episodes of Full Metal Alchemist unfolds, many readers have jumped in without hesitation even if they know it is a trap. Especially the content of the previous episode, which happened to be serialized to the situation where Edward and Al were about to start a brotherly war. Although they knew that Al was controlled, the two brothers who originally depended on each other and loved each other now had to enter the mode of killing each other as opponents. Just a few pages of comics made the readers' hearts complete the super evolution from warmth to anxiety. So this episode of Full Metal Alchemist ranked fourth again, just like a certain atomic collapse violent girl, it is on the same level. Hey! Because the ranking began to rise, Yoshida naturally felt a lot more relaxed. The days of being nervous before were over, so Yoshida also relaxed his urging and supervision of Takahashi Makoto. Because Yoshida focused on Full Metal Alchemist before, the little otter lived a very carefree life. However, with the counterattack of Full Metal Alchemist during this period, Yoshida once again focused on the little otter. "Here American, you seem to have been quite lax recently." Yoshida, like the owner, folded his arms in front of his chest, showed a sinister smile on his face, and began to teach the little otter harmoniously in an almost devilish voice. "After the animation is broadcast, you can't be so lax. Then according to the agreement, this week's Red Tree Time will be cancelled. Mr. Yoshida, please forgive me for being lax this time. I will work hard to draw comics." The little otter moved from the table where he was drawing comics before to Yoshida's feet at a speed that humans could hardly reach, hugged Yoshida's legs and began to beg bitterly. This move is called holding thighs and begging. "Please, Mr. Yoshida, I will definitely draw comics seriously in the future. So this week." "Huh? But you are now." Before Yoshida finished speaking, the little otter immediately performed phase shift, returned to the table again, and took the paintbrush to enter the crazy painting mode. "Well, I'll consider it for your good performance. If you finish the comics for this week and next week, maybe I can add some." "Add? I'll start drawing now. Not to mention this week's, I'll finish next week's soon." The little sea otter was stunned at first, but after reacting, his face was full of expectation and he continued to work hard, muttering, "Mr. Yoshida, you are so good to me. It's my life's blessing to meet you. Come on, here American." While encouraging the little sea otter who was working hard to draw, Yoshida took out a small notebook from his jacket pocket and flipped through it quickly. He stopped from time to time and drew on it with a pen, showing a smile called serious and devilish to the end on his face. "Well, by the way, This small notebook is not a notebook lost by a certain death god, but a blue manual written by Makoto Takahashi, titled On the Correct Taming Method of Little Sea Otters. Also working hard is Yashiro Mumanji, who has entered the new series with PCP. Since they won the first place in the first episode, the two who were nervous before finally breathed a sigh of relief. Although Landai was still drawing seriously on the manuscript paper, Huang Mao Glasses entered the lazy mode and started reading comics. Well, Huang Mao Glasses is not lazy. For cartoonists whose comics are serialized in Shonen Jump, in addition to paying attention to their own works, many cartoonists are used to taking a look at the recently serialized comics. Whether it is used as a reference for their own comics or as an educational object for failure cases, reading other people's comics can benefit from it. In addition to being a recreational and relaxing activity in leisure time, it is also a kind of learning. Yachin Mumenjai, who thinks that their talents are just average, naturally holds this attitude. Especially the comics of the two cartoonists, Makoto Takahashi and Eiji Nizuma, who are regarded by the two as the objects they always want to surpass, have basically been read by the two several times. Hey, the best, looking at Ah Chang's Full Metal Alchemist, I suddenly feel lucky. After putting down Shonen Jump in his hand, the man with yellow hair and glasses showed a trace of luck on his face. Fortunately, our PCP was serialized one step ahead, otherwise the first place would really belong to. Eh? Why do you think so, Kairan? Landai looked at his good friend partner with a surprised face. Although Full Metal Alchemist is indeed very exciting, our new serialized comic PCP is not bad either. Unlike the model of PCP consisting of multiple stories, the main line of the comic Full Metal Alchemist has two. At the beginning, it is the main plot is about the Edward brothers looking for a way to restore their bodies. Then, as the brothers travel, another main plot is also involved. In order to prevent the artificial humans from launching a nationwide human transformation, the Edward brothers naturally have to resist to the end. The man with yellow hair and glasses pushed his glasses, with a puzzled look on his face, but I am very curious now, what will be the final ending of Ah Chang? Finding a way to restore the body, and becoming a savior to save people's lives, how will these two plots be arranged together? Any questions? Landai looked at his good friend who fell into a state of contemplation and stopped the brush in his hand. Although Landai really wanted the man with yellow hair and glasses to give up this irrelevant thinking and think about the content of the next episode, but looking at the tired look on his teammates' faces, well, let's take a break now. Of course there is a problem. The yellow-haired glasses man scratched his head with some trouble and pointed at the comic to explain to Landai. In the comic, Cheng mentioned many times through Edward's words that he would not use sacrifice. Recovering the body at the cost of someone else's life. But according to the setting of the entire comic, the rule of equal exchange is not allowed to be subverted, but if Al wants to recover his body, can Al actually recover his body in the end? Seeing the yellow-haired glasses man completely lost in thought, Landai looked at the clock on the wall with a tangled look on his face. At this time, it's not the time to think about that guy Cheng's comics, but it's the time to seriously think about the content of the next chapter. Just when Landai was about to speak, the yellow-haired glasses guy's phone rang. It was Makoto Takahashi calling. Cheng, I'm just looking for you. The yellow-haired glasses man couldn't wait to ask, about the ending of Steel, Al finally. Seeing the expectant look on his good friend's face, Landai was immediately speechless. Even though they are right next door, they still use mobile phones to communicate. Are these two guys idiots? Although he was so upset in his heart, Landai still put down his painting brush, walked to his good friend, and made the famous hand gesture to signal his friend to turn on the speakerphone. Hey, Mr. Huang-haired glasses, you are very thoughtful. Okay, don't talk nonsense, hurry up and sign a contract with me. This way you can get a glimpse of the root cause and move towards a new world. After listening to Mr. Huang-haired glasses after the question, Takahashi replied. the existence named Aken Mumenjai was instantly ravaged by the mental attack of Shuji Kwanki, and his soul was almost burned out. Your PCP this time is very good, Makoto Takahashi, who was passively emitting the second wave, praised him unconsciously, but his tone was a little, well, according to many people, some subtle. This is a sincere compliment. Although Aken Mumenjai was happy to hear such a comment, but what was going on with this condescending tone of seniors instructing juniors? Big fire. Aken Mumenjai entered the synchronization mode again, ready to complete the integration. Well, the one who makes up the head should be Mr. Huang-haired glasses. Well, although this is true, but, because of your actions, the world-destroying dragon that was sealed in my body awakened. This powerful existence that once destroyed 33 dimensions is about to appear again. You only have to. You can watch the world being destroyed without being able to save it. Take advantage of the last moment to say your final goodbyes to your family and loved ones. Stupid humans, this world will eventually be destroyed. The only thing you can do is tremble and cry. Drink ha 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 ha. HN, did you suffer from the Chuyunibu again? It wasn't just Yachin Mumenjai and the two who were speechless, even the three assistants who had just walked in were also speechless. Aken Mumenjai's assistants, although they had heard from two people before that there was a cartoonist living next door, a cartoonist suffering from Chuyunibu, but they did not expect, to this extent, even if they accepted a certain professor. The electric shock seems to have cured me. Moxie, is this teacher Yachin Mumenjai? Just when Yachin Mumenjai and the two were about to complain and fight back, a familiar voice rang on the phone. The newly serialized PCP is really interesting. If I don't work hard, I will definitely be surpassed. New wife Ag, Ajumumenha and the two were completely shocked. I looked at the name on my phone and there was no doubt that it was Makoto Takahashi. But why is Ag Nyaizuma and Makoto Takahashi together? After Aken Mumenjai fell into confusion. That teacher from the Phoenix Academy is here now and told me something. Ag Nyazuma's tone sounded unexpectedly serious. Not to mention Ajumumenha, even the three assistants were nervous unconsciously. Standing up, the whole studio fell into a strange atmosphere. Phoenix Academy teacher, it's up to you to speak. Humph. Next will be the last performance time of Steel, Takahashi Saichuyo. No, it should not be in the middle 2 mode now. This feeling of overwhelming confidence is definitely the awakening of the Godhead and the ascension to the avenue. Omen. Let you witness the most powerful blow of my most loyal servant. With this blow, I will dominate the world and become the ruler of this fallen dark world. Struggle, ants. Your previous efforts, they will all become the solid foundation for my dominance. My dominance is invincible. Ha 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 ha. The ranking of steel refining in this chapter is 4th. This ranking may be the last time. The next steel refining will firmly occupy the first position by the time it is completed. Although the Phoenix Academy teacher said so, but Nyaizuma Ag grabbed the phone, his voice full of high morale. Teacher Ajumumenha, let us work together to stop the Overlord Phoenix with comics. UNG is really on his way to conquest. Teacher Fusion, I also said the same thing, and well, King of Black Flame, raise your glass. After drinking this glass of wine, let us decide the outcome on the battlefield. Letting you die on such a battlefield is out of my respect for you as a king. Makoto Takahashi seemed to be drinking with his new wife Ag, while Ajumumenha found that the phone was cut off before she could recover from the extremely arrogant Chuyuni's speech. The cartoonists who are familiar with Makoto Takahashi, Ajumumenha who is a neighbor and a junior high school classmate, naturally also received the domineering declaration of Takahashi Makoto's 2nd grade. On the side of the Little Sea Otter, the Little Sea Otter clearly wanted to take a break from the publication, and even planned to enter a permanent dormant period. Because of Yashida's evil eyes behind him and the guidance of the dark-hearted tone that was almost collapse, He tearfully talked to the phoenix in his mind. The fierce and powerful god of the hospital has entered the enemy mode. Even Miss Aoki Hong, who had always seemed to be indifferent to the world, was dragged into a state of active preparation by Takahashi Makoto's arrogant declaration of dominating the second grade, not to mention the hot-tempered silver-haired boy Fukuda. Got it? Fukuda had received a call from his new wife Ag before, so he naturally knew more details. In addition, the newly serialized short story was completely blown up by Ajumu Menha, so he had long wanted to have a big fight. After it ended, he and Ajo after the call, Mu Menjai tightened her headscarf and prepared to switch to the second-level transformation fighting state. Mr. Fukuda should also know about it, as well as Miss Kang Shuhong, plus Mr. Hiramaru. After Ajumu Menjai was silent for a moment, he combined fighting spirit and dissatisfaction to create a powerful the fighting spirit, synchronization rate, etc. have already exceeded the minimum limit of the combination. We must let that arrogant Chuyuni Cheng learn the principles of life from failure. The little universe of cartoonists that has been gradually forgotten seems to be burning again under the deliberate instigation of Makoto Takahashi. So Mangaka Hohoin Kuma, no, Makoto Takahashi who is on the road to domination, let's have a good fight. Let's embark on the road of domineering conquest before the end of steel, drink ha 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 ha. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 146. After the new episode of Full Metal Alchemist won the first place, the cartoonists who were ridiculed by Makoto Takahashi and then awakened their small universes, although they were still full of fighting spirit, they withdrew from the passionate fighting state and switched to the calm thinking mode. The ancients once said, knowing yourself and knowing the enemy, you can fight 100 battles without danger. If you want to defeat Makoto Takahashi and stop the conquest of the overlord Fengguangai Yuan Kuma, then the first thing to do is to understand Fengguangai Yuan Kuma. To be precise, it is to understand his comic Full Metal Alchemist. Like many readers, several cartoonists also started to read Full Metal Alchemist, watching it over and over again. In Full Metal Alchemist, there is a group of the most special existences, which are the 7 androids incarnated by the original sin of mankind. This group of androids, in terms of number, is the same as the anti-sky mutual rubbing baby, so it is also powerful to the extent of being out of common sense. Although Mustang once killed the android Rast in the previous comics, this does not mean that the so-called androids are weak. Because of the existence of the Philosopher's Stone, the androids who have completed infinite resurrection with the power of the Philosopher's Stone are basically difficult to kill. However, according to the principle of equivalent exchange, while the Philosopher's Stone provides the androids with powerful continuous combat capabilities, it also has a powerful side effect, that is, self-repair of the damage caused by the battle. Mustang used flame alchemy to calcine Rast, and Rast's body was severely injured and unable to move. The Philosopher's Stone was induced to repair itself, and then Mustang performed flame alchemy again. Like the Garden King Tiger World Tree Lion, Mustang opened an unscrupulous infinite chain. So Rast died. It was because Mustang triggered an infinite loop and forcibly consumed Rast's Philosopher's Stone. However, the android Pride, who was named for his arrogance, was nominally the adopted son of the president, Salim, but in fact he was the android originally created by Father. His true face is the same as the little man in the flask, with countless eyes and mouths on the huge black shadow. As an upgraded version of the tentacle monster, it looks ghostly and evil. Like the little man in the flask, this first android can only survive in a container, and its container is Salim Shota, who is aliased as the son of the president. As the first android, this little Shota controls Al, and is the most difficult enemy for Edward, the protagonist. Even if there is a team with the android Greed, it is basically difficult to clear this hell-level copy. In addition, Gratny, the cute fat man, is watching closely, and the success rate is almost zero. The long-awaited battle scene has arrived. Excluding the battle of brothers killing each other, what readers are most concerned about is how Edward and others will save Al from the hands of the Shota tentacle monster. Unlike the invincible mode of the protagonist imagined by readers, Edward and others fought extremely awkwardly at the beginning, and even the android greed of the rebellious camp unexpectedly fell into a bitter battle. However, after several encounters, Edward discovered Pride's weakness. This android who launches tentacle attacks and defenses through shadows needs a light source to obtain shadows. Although Edward, who was clever, activated alchemy, causing the distant town to fall into darkness and destroying the light source, his own side also fell into darkness. Physical attacks were completely lost, killing 1,000 enemies and losing 800 of his own, and this effect also made the two hostile parties temporarily enter a state of truce. There is shadow only when there is light. In complete darkness, even Pride cannot materialize. In addition to making his companions understand, Grid's explanation also made readers who have been reading the comics feel a sense of sudden enlightenment. As an enemy, Pride is too powerful. Whether attacking or defending, Edward and others look extremely embarrassed. According to the comics, the father mentioned by the android is the final enemy. If it was just an android, Edward and others on the protagonist's side would be so embarrassed that they could not fight, then it can be imagined that when dealing with father in the end, Edward and others would definitely be killed instantly, for sure. By the way, is this really just about fighting against androids? How strong will the enemies be in the future? The uncle who runs the supermarket, with a cigarette in his mouth, stared at the comics with his eyes and frowned. This middle-aged uncle who is familiar with Takahashi Makoto now naturally knows that Takahashi Makoto is the real body of the cartoonist Fengguangai Yuan Kyoma. But even after knowing this, the middle-aged uncle still has no change. Whether it is a cartoonist or a middle school patient, the identity is not important, as long as the comics are good-looking and interesting. The content of this episode made the middle-aged uncle enter a state of fascination, and even planned to close the supermarket for an afternoon to read comics. It's not that he is not doing his job, but because he loves deeply. In the comics, Gratny has a keen sense of smell and can determine the position of the enemy in the dark. Just when the two sides were in a stalemate because of the darkness, Gratny's role as a surprise attack was highlighted. After watching Gratny easily find the teammates on the protagonist's side, the middle-aged uncle began to worry. But Gratny ignored one thing, and that was His Royal Highness the Prince, who became good friends with the artificial Glid. After switching souls during the battle, His Royal Highness relied on breath sensing to easily take the initiative in the battle and began to kill Gratny again and again. And Gratny, who was killed many times, fell into a violent state, opened the door of false truth again, and prepared to devour Edward and others. Like many readers, the middle-aged uncle remembers Gratny's ability very clearly. This heaven-defying ability is basically invincible to Edward and others at this stage. And just when the middle-aged uncle started to worry, reinforcements miraculously appeared. At the beginning of the comic, there are no reinforcements drawn, but simple lines, a humanoid shadow, and the sluggish reactions of Edward and others to let readers know that someone has entered the battlefield. Then the screen changed, switching directly to Gratny, who was dismembered. Then a sudden figure stood in front of Gratny's body, with a mask on his face and a mechanical armor with a blade on his arm. Needless to say his identity, the middle-aged uncle as a reader instantly remembered this person who had been there before. The character who left was Lan Fang, the loyal guard of His Highness the Prince, who was secretly in love with the prince. This girl who silently protected His Highness the Prince replaced her lost arm with a mechanical armor and took Gratny's life as soon as she appeared on the scene. "Hey, Master Administrator, I need to purchase a large amount of military-type cat food for the march." The one-eyed boy in a white coat stood in front of the middle-aged uncle with a smile on his face. As usual, the magic level is. There is, on the shelf in the 6th row, although he is the owner of a small supermarket, although he adheres to the concept of customers are the king, and although he fell into a state of obsession because of reading comics, he is still fascinated by this familiar way of speaking. Uncle Nian answered subconsciously. As if he noticed something was wrong, the middle-aged uncle finally put down the comic and looked at the young man in front of him with a smile on his face. So it's you, the Demon King of Healing and Love, His Majesty the Phoenix Academy's fierce crown. Administrator, have you been brainwashed by the organization? Makoto Takahashi looked at the middle-aged uncle in surprise, shook his head and explained, the Demon King of Healing Love, that is my partner, a man imprisoned in the Millennium Artifact. Hey, regarding Makoto Takahashi's so-so remarks, the uncle shook his head and couldn't laugh or cry. Do you want to change the name of this second-grade patient every time? Last time he claimed to be a silver-white and red-eyed ghost beast named Kyubei who could grant a wish after signing a contract. Last time he claimed to be the Demon King's crown prince. This time he claimed to be a crazy cartoonist. Then next time, he is a Super Saiyan from Namek. Human. Oh. I actually have the anti-realm treasure, I'm so touched. Makoto Takahashi held a publication with a shamefully revealing cover in his hand, with a devilish smile on his face. The Dark World has been lost for a long time. I didn't expect that the Bible would become the private property of the administrator, if Big Sister knew. 40% off, the uncle gave the best discount without hesitation. The pious smile on his face that said please let me go instantly suppressed the anger and shyness that were about to explode. Thank you for saving precious funds for the association, he said words of gratitude, but there was no hint of gratitude on his face. Makoto Takahashi still said words of unknown meaning, meow stars, as the advance force of the association, are about to clean up this dirty and rotten world. We will remember what you did as administrator. Thank you from the cat people. You will receive it soon, administrator. Cheng, this episode of Steel Refining is very exciting. Although the middle-aged uncle hasn't finished reading it yet, he didn't hesitate to praise it. While giving praise to Makoto Takahashi, he also did not forget to convey the message to Makoto Takahashi through his eyes. Don't tell my big sister that I hide shameful publications at the same time, he also added, this is an equal exchange. The comics are good looking, just get a discount. Understood, Makoto Takahashi signaled receipt and prepared to turn around and leave. After just a few steps, Takahashi Makoto stopped while the middle-aged man's eyelids were twitching. Turning around, he looked at the middle-aged uncle with a smile on his face. The steal until the end will be even more exciting. Equivalent exchange, hee. I'm looking forward to the price paid by the administrator. Remember, winning the first place in this chapter is just the beginning. Will the future comics be even more exciting? Looking at the comics in his hands and thinking about Takahashi Makoto's words, the middle-aged uncle was shocked. Although I haven't finished reading this chapter of Steel Refining yet, the middle-aged uncle already thinks it's great for the content of this chapter. According to Makoto Takahashi, the next episode of Steel will be even more exciting, which means, you foolish administrator, that distorted expression of anticipation and pain on your face really makes me feel happy. Makoto Takahashi completed the personality switch in an instant, with a wicked smile on his face and said crazy words. Boss declaration. He laughed wildly and turned around to leave. Your desire and expectation for the unknown will become the sharp blade for me to reach the top of dominance. Ha 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 ha. Cheng, this guy, seems to have developed an incredible personality. If we continue to offer discounts like this, I will pay for all my wife's money. After watching Makoto Takahashi leave in fear, the middle-aged man smiled bitterly. Is this guy forcing me on purpose? Does he want me to go earlier? Looking at the busy and slender figure opposite, the middle-aged uncle fell into some kind of delusion. No, it was confusion. The Full Metal Alchemist by cartoonist Hao Wing Kuma won the first place this time. At the same time, It also allowed Takahashi Makoto to complete the hidden branch of the middle-aged uncle's courtship named I Can Only Help You Here. According to the common descriptions in some martial arts novels, in order to highlight the protagonist's extraordinary talent or unfathomable martial arts, it is usually described in one sentence. You may have become so familiar with the words that you are almost sick of it. That is, what a Takahashi Makoto! What a Hao Winkuma! Takahashi Makoto and Hao Winkuma, two characters in one, have received new evaluations. A middle school cartoonist. Author, MaleProtagonist Mao. Chapter 147. A week is as long as a century for many fans of Full Metal Alchemist who follow the comics. Some readers have already called to urge the editorial department, hoping that Shonen Jump will release a supplement so that they can see the next chapter of Full Metal Alchemist. But how could the commander, who is always serious, agree to such a thing? You should know that similar things have happened several times before, but Shonen Jump has never released a supplement. I can understand the reader's eagerness to see the next chapter, but some necessary principles must still be followed. There is no exception for the release of supplements, except for some natural disasters and man-made disasters. There was no such thing before, and there will never be such a thing in the future. The urging of readers made everyone in the editorial department suffer and happy, and Makoto Takahashi was also in some trouble. Because I have been feeling monitored recently, as a middle school student, the super sixth sense of the cartoonist made Makoto Takahashi feel the existence of a suspected stalker. Of course, Yoshida sneered at such a statement, stubbornly believing that this was Takahashi Makoto's second-year syndrome. Tisk. Recently, there are more and more people peeping at the index of forbidden books. It seems that after Sebastian left, those dark world beings of unknown affiliation have also begun to stir. Leaning against the window, gently pulling open a corner of the curtain, Takahashi Makoto hid in the shadows, cautiously looking out, muttering with some dissatisfaction, "Fanatical believers can easily be used by the enemy and will become the assassination blade that destroys religion. Can such a strategy be used by an organization that has been hostile to our association for a long time? My beloved cat, what do you think?" Dead, actually dead, Yoshida put down the comic in his hand, with a look of surprise on his face. He didn't answer Takahashi Makoto at all, and muttered in a voice that only he could hear, "I didn't expect Gratni to be killed by pride." Death? It's indeed a good choice. Takahashi Makoto, who was completely trapped in the delusion of being stalked and hunted, didn't hear the second half of Yoshida's words clearly, but nodded in agreement. That's right, let those souls brainwashed by the organization no longer wander in the world, and return to the arms of the leader. I can't stand it, I can't stand it at all. Even Yoshida, who thinks he is immune to the fluctuations of the second-year virus, seems to have reached his limit now. Obviously, the comic is very exciting and makes people intoxicated, but there is a person next to him who keeps talking and can't stop. Although the skill of splitting and multitasking is a skill mastered in school days, it has reached the highest level when practicing until work, but that is only for ordinary people. As a carrier of the Chuyunibi virus, Takahashi Makoto's powerful corrosive power makes Yoshida want to go back to his hometown to practice in seclusion. Ah Cheng, I've accepted the comic manuscript for this episode. Goodbye. After getting up and saying goodbye hastily, Yoshida left in a hurry. Tisk, leaving at this time, is he really an undercover of the organization? Looking at Yoshida's hurried escape, Takahashi Makoto curled his lips in disdain, turned his head and looked at the assistants who had been holding back their smiles, and showed a devilish smile on his face. Brother Muse, after completing my hegemony this time, you can go back to your hometown to get married. So work hard. This is a curse. This is definitely a curse. Li Binjian, who was like 100,000 beasts roaring and stampeding through his heart, did not dare to make any sound at all in the face of Takahashi Makoto, who opened a devilish smile. He could only bow his head and work seriously as if he was in the abyss of despair. Under Lee Benjian's resentful and resigned work, and under the whip of Takahashi Makoto's madness, the highly anticipated Full Metal Alchemist finally appeared a week later. So many people came to buy it. Lee Junfei, who finally squeezed out of the crowd, showed a thankful expression on his face, and quietly put the comic in his hand into his arms. Fortunately, I came early. Lee Junfei has not been in contact with comics for a long time, and even at the beginning, he didn't like comics from the bottom of his heart. For a guy who likes to play, wanting to read comics quietly is basically like a novice who just entered the game directly brushing the hell copy. And Lee Junfei started reading Full Metal Alchemist now, which was completely an accidental reason. It is said that when Lee Junfei asked his friends to hang out together, he found that everyone was discussing a comic called Full Metal Alchemist. Lee Junfei, who had never read Full Metal Alchemist at all, was isolated very sadly. Friends kept discussing the plot of Full Metal Alchemist. Lee Junfei, who had never read the comics, couldn't find any topic to discuss. Even if he tried to change the topic several times, it was still useless. Holding the thought of his Full Metal Alchemist really that good, out of curiosity, Lee Junfei bought all the single volumes that were previously released and took them home. Lee Junfei is of course still the same as before, not very fond of comics. In addition to the previous curiosity, he also wants to understand what Full Metal Alchemist is about, so as to avoid not being able to find a topic to talk about with friends next time he goes out, and an isolated incident will happen again. As a result, Lee Junfei was completely addicted to Full Metal Alchemist after reading it. The disdain in his heart gradually disappeared, and instead, he complained about the cartoonist Hauer Kuma and Shonen Jump. Unlike the single volume, the content behind it has not yet come out. Reading the serialized content one by one made Lee Junfei, an impatient guy, fall into anxiety. Because he was eager to know the follow-up development, the name of Lee Junfei was naturally among the readers who called the editorial department before. So like many Full Metal Alchemist fans, after getting the new issue of Shonen Jump, Lee Junfei directly ignored and skipped other comics and started reading Full Metal Alchemist. The content of this episode continued the previous battle. With the appearance of reinforcements, Edward and the others gradually took the initiative. Edward used the strong light of the flash bomb to not only successfully rescue Al from Pride, but also reverse the entire battle situation. Even after Gratny and Pride joined forces, the androids were still at a disadvantage. Although Gratny is an android, his IQ is about the same as that of a child. Looking at Gratny, who was killed many times by Lanfang and the prince in the comics and fled in tears, Lee Junfei smiled. Although he is an android, Gratny's personality is not too annoying. In addition, Gratny did not do anything excessive. The meaning of his existence is completely reduced to being cute and funny. Because, that woman and Grid are so weird. They know where I am even in the dark. Although it is just a text expression, combined with Gratny's cute expression, even if it is just a close-up of the comic, it makes Lee Junfei laugh. This look of a child who was bullied and complained to his parents, even as an android in the villain camp, makes many readers have a better impression of Gratny. Glatny, how many times have you died? I don't know, I died many times. I was also seriously injured. If this goes on, they might destroy me. Looking at the conversation between Salim, the boy who is the container of Pride, and Gratny, the cute fat man, in the comics, Lee Junfei, who was reading the comics, was stunned. Could it be that this battle has stopped just like that? No, 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 according to the evil taste of Phoenix Court, it is very likely to do so. If it is really as he thought, the androids retreat without fighting, Lee Junfei said that he would definitely throw the comics on the ground. The following development almost made Lee Junfei throw the comics. The androids did not retreat as he thought, but fought internally. It can't be said to be an internal fight. After all, Gratny was defenseless and was directly swallowed by pride. "No, don't eat me, it hurts, help, rest." The content of just 2 comics made Gratny, who was very powerful before, be directly swallowed by pride, and even his body was gone. As a result, the fat man could not escape death. Even Gratny, who has the dual attributes of a foodie and a cute boy, is the same. Although he has almost invincible skills in terms of combat power, in the final analysis, Gratny's death is entirely due to the wrong choice of teammates. The first teammate is Rast, who has the ultimate weapon that makes many women unconsciously hostile. At that time, Gratny, because of the support of his god teammates, died and injured less frequently. After cooperating with the cross-dressing maniac Inway, the god teammate was reduced to the level of ordinary bones. At that time, Gratny's casualties gradually increased. The last teammate, after choosing pride, a pit bear kid, was naturally killed without any surprise and died directly. By the way, through Gratny's life, have you understood the importance of choosing teammates? The so-called brotherhood between artificial people and the brotherhood between Edward and his brother form a very strong contrast. When Edward was cornered by Scar, he gave up hope of survival, but he still cared about Al, who was standing by his side, and hoped that Scar would let his brother Al go after killing him. In this scene, looking at the artificial man who was cornered, Gratny was swallowed by pride without hesitation. Like Lee Junfei, many readers, while lamenting pride's ruthlessness and righteousness, also had a deeper understanding of the brotherhood between Edward and his brother. After swallowing Gratny, pride acquired Gratny's ability. Now pride can feel the smell of people around him even if he closes his eyes. And after obtaining the Philosopher's Stone in Gratny's body, pride's combat power has recovered a lot. On the other hand, Edward's side has consumed a lot of energy in the previous battle, and now the flash bombs have been used up again, and the same tactics cannot be used again. Therefore, after the battle resumed, Edward and other protagonists fell into an embarrassing disadvantage again. This is trouble. As the plot of the comic developed, Lee Junfei didn't have time to feel sad for Gratny, the funny villain, but he began to worry about Edward and others. After reading every line of dialogue carefully, Lee Junfei turned to the next page of the comic and kept muttering, "Now, let alone killing Pride, Edward and others have a problem protecting themselves. Is Dad a very powerful alchemist?" "Yes, he is very powerful. I believe in Dad's ability. I have a plan." Looking at the comic suddenly jumped to the conversation between Al and Hohenheim. Lee Junfei had a bad feeling. The plan Al mentioned actually required Hohenheim's help. What did Al want to do? Could it be that he was going to die with pride? It seemed that Al couldn't do this. He couldn't wait to turn to the next page of the comic, and the corners of Lee Junfei's mouth began to twitch, because the content of this chapter ended here. I knew it would develop like this. In the end, I have to wait for another week. How can I fix it? Like Lee Junfei, who kept talking, many readers fell into a rampage. The previous 1 or 2 months of Full Metal Alchemist were not very exciting, so this kind of evil plot card thing did not have much impact on readers. But now the battles in the comics are continuous, and the story plot is ups and downs. At this time, if the plot is deliberately stuck, the resentment of readers has begun to gather and become a drill that can break through the sky. A middle school cartoonist. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 148. Hey, that proud look. Looking at Yoshida's silly smile, Yujiro, one of the double Hattori, who is also the editor of Ag Arizuma, looked at the next to him, Kai Urchin Hattori, who was also one of the double Hattori. The current editor of Yachin Mumenjai complained with a look of displeasure on his face, "Isn't it this episode of Steel that won the first place again? If it were you, I guess it would be the same." Haha, Hattori, who has a sea urchin head, is much calmer. His habitual haha laughter makes many people unable to hate this uncle with a sea urchin head. Takahashi Makoto, that is, the cartoonist Phoenix Institute's murderous story. I heard some things from Ajumu. It's really good to be young, full of blood and high fighting spirit. Haha. Eiji Niizuma told me the same thing. The expression on Yujiro's face became even more unhappy. Before the end of Steel, he continued to be the first. This kind of statement is really too arrogant. I always thought that Fukuda was very arrogant. It's pricking my head, but compared to that guy Takahashi Makoto, Fukuda is definitely a good young man. Haha, this kind of competition might be very interesting. Uncle Hattori scratched his sea urchin-style hairstyle, with an expectant smile on his face. Aiken Momenha has proposed a plan and wants to try it. Let's see if we can break the consecutive #1 ranking of Steel. Shinzuma-kun was only focused on chasing Takahashi Makoto. Did he forget that there was someone chasing him behind him? Yujiro, who had always wanted a promotion and a salary increase, immediately became alert to Hattori's remarks. After all, the abilities of Yachin Mumanjai are obvious to all the colleagues in the editorial department. If Eiji Shinzuma doesn't work hard, let alone catching up with Makoto Takahashi, I'm afraid he will soon be surpassed by Ajumu Menha. The whispers and low-level discussions among his colleagues were naturally heard by Yoshida, but he always maintained an indifferent smile. The last few episodes of Steel have been smooth sailing. The first place was won without any suspense, not to mention Yoshida. Even the editor-in-chief was a little surprised. Yoshida had previously doubted whether Takahashi Makoto might be more likely to make thunder than rain, but now it seems that he is obviously overthinking it. As for wanting to suppress Steel, snort. Stupid human beings, the Phoenix Academy will really let you see the true cruel hell of despair. But if this kind of development happens a few more times, Yoshida peeked at the deputy editor's seat, with an expectant smile of ambition on his face. But Yoshida seems to have forgotten that the manga currently being serialized is called Steel, and its persistent theme is equivalent exchange. This kind of smooth development requires paying a corresponding price. A phone call from Takahashi Makoto's manga assistant instantly put Yoshida into sluggish horror mode. Nani, the entire editorial department heard this panicked and weird scream. Then many colleagues saw Yoshida grabbing his briefcase and rushing out of the editorial office. He even knocked the deputy editor to the ground on the way without any intention of stopping. With no intention of helping the dark-faced deputy editor up, Yoshida ran and shouted, "Sorry, I'll explain to you when I get back, people's lives are at stake here." It's not that Yoshida has entered the mode of becoming a father, but he heard on the phone that Makoto Takahashi is committing suicide and is engaging in various difficult suicide attempts. Yoshida naturally believed in his assistant, who was still in the normal human category. Of course, Yoshida will never have the idea of letting his assistants subdue Takahashi Makoto. As for Tintin, who has the highest force value, a certain arrogant Chuyunibu patient once made an arrogant declaration that if one person is not enough, let's fight 10. When Yoshida felt that Takahashi Makoto was at home in a panic, he saw Takahashi Makoto standing on the railing of the balcony, looking down at the earth calmly. Yoshida's mouth twitched wildly. Isn't that Chuyunibu worried about falling? This is what people on the 8th floor say. Even if you have incredible strength, you will still be thrown into the street if you fall. Hey, my beloved cat, you're here. Makoto Takahashi's white coat was blown up by the strong wind, just like the cloak of a king in movies and TV shows. Looking at Yoshida, who was panting and unable to complain, Makoto Takahashi pointed to the street below where people were driving, and asked Yoshida in a solemn tone, "What did you hit? Chen, can you come down first?" Like many assistants, Yoshida deliberately kept a distance, for fear of accidentally frightening Takahashi Makoto and falling. But seeing Makoto Takahashi shaking his head in silence, Yoshida knew that he could only answer Makoto Takahashi's question now. Yoshida pretended to look up and said in a flattering manner, "People? Vehicles?" Humph. Extremely superficial, Makoto Takahashi turned around at a high speed, making Yoshida's heart rise to his throat. What I see is, the world. Damn it to your sister. Are you envious of my balance ability? It's innate. Are you envious of my mental strength? This is also innate. Wait, it's still far from enough. In the end, under the panicked gaze of everyone, Takahashi Makoto jumped down from the railing with a very graceful movement. It's just that this completely offline behavior has naturally been besieged by everyone. I was forced to give oral instructions for a long time. The reason why I didn't choose to beat Takahashi Makoto violently was because of the strength value of a certain junior high school student who was deviant from common sense. If he did it, haha. Aiken, I heard that Aiken Mumenji's side seems to want to suppress steel refining. Yoshida revealed the previously eavesdropped information to Takahashi Makoto, with a sinister smile on his face. Did you deliberately put some water in it, and then give them the illusion that they can surpass it, and then slap them to death? My familiar cat, are you ordering me? Takahashi Makoto handed the manga manuscript to Yoshida. In the past, this idea was a good idea, but now it is completely unnecessary. Because steel ahead, no more rivals. Just as Makoto Takahashi said, Metal Steel has turned on the unparalleled mode. With a divine outfit and full auxiliary halo, a brutal continuous killing begins. First of all, the content of this recent chapter. The method of combat that Al came up with was to use himself as a bait to entangle Pride, and let Hohenheim activate alchemy to seal the two of them with a huge stone ball. Look at it this way: getting up is an act of self-sacrifice, but it's not actually like that. As one of the candidates for the human pillar, Al must appear in front of Father on the appointed day. But now Al is not only trapped and unable to come out, but also traps Pride, the powerful fighting force of the androids. With Al's analysis, many readers came to their senses. Al's seemingly self-sacrifice method is actually it's a strategy that kills two birds with one stone. So first blood is obtained. Then came Mustang, who finally took advantage of the time when the president disappeared to launch an armed coup, and cooperated with the Northern Army to launch a surprise attack on the headquarters. In this episode, Mustang took his men into action. Although there were only a small number of people, the headquarters fell into chaos. In this chapter, the most exciting part for readers is naturally the sudden appearance of reinforcements when Mustang and others were running out of ammunition. Long time no see, Colonel Mustang, the driver who transported a large amount of ammunition to Mustang and others, opened his hood and revealed his true identity. It was Ross, who had faked his death and fled to the new country. Second Lieutenant Maria Rose returned without permission today. Mustang was naturally surprised by Ross's return, and naturally regarded the supporting arms as aid from some high-ranking officials and ministers of the new country. Because Mustang holds the military rank of colonel, he naturally maintains a certain tone of caution when contacting the other party. I am Colonel Roy Mustang. Thank you for this. Before he could finish his words, he was interrupted by the other party's sneer. Look at your respectful tone. Let's go back to your usual style, Colonel. The comic switched to a man sitting in a wheelchair with a cigarette in his mouth. He really retired because he was stabbed by Rust. Habak. Since its establishment 80 years ago, everything from underwear to armored combat vehicles has been delivered to your door at any time with just a phone call. Hubbock's grocery store in your town. So, Colonel, when are you going to pay the bill? Let's get the credit first. Wait until I'm successful. Mustang naturally handled Habak's assistance with arrogance. When many readers saw this, they had a look of joy on their faces, just like Mustang. After all, Habak, who had been decadent before, was able to provide timely support this time when everyone was in an ammunition crisis. In addition to reversing the disadvantage, it also meant that the teammate who had fought together had returned again. The unexpected reinforcements, coupled with Mustang's ambitious battle in this episode, make this episode of Steel a double kill. And just when the content of this chapter completed the double kill, Yachin Mumanjai also entered the final stage of the layout. PCP is a comic that focuses on the development of a single story. Unlike Steel, which requires a long period of planning, one episode tells a story and slowly accumulates popularity. After all, PCP is not a king. Comics, this approach is understandable. But the desire to defeat Takahashi Makoto and let PCP defeat Steel made Manjiaju make a bold and risky plan, which is to fight back through a short novel. After all, PCP is the same as Conan in terms of category, and it belongs to the suspense and mystery comics. If this kind of decrypted comic drags out the story for too long, it can easily be self-defeating and make readers lose interest. Different from the Royal Boy comics, in the suspense and mystery comics, any tiny detail may become a key clue. If the serialization time is too long, readers can easily overlook or even forget some details. After all, in the case of Shonen Jump published weekly, it is impossible for readers to spend a few weeks looking at the suspenseful layout, and then spend a few weeks watching the manga protagonist decipher the secrets. Therefore, the risk to be taken by serializing an event in a few words is very high. Of course, there are also benefits. The layout will shock readers, and the resolution of the incident will exceed readers' expectations. Naturally, it can also gather a lot of popularity. But the premise of all this is that the layout of the comic must be excellent, and the solution chapter must be even better. But should we say that Ajumumenha has the protagonist's advantage hidden here, or is it that Makoto Takahashi's luck has recently dropped to the level of a spearman? The final layout chapter of Ajumumenha created a strong suspense and made many readers deeply involved in it. Many readers discussed it in their spare time and speculated on the final ending. On the other hand, Takahashi Makoto's side, the content of the story is told in one episode. Although the story of the increasingly popular Snow Queen carries out a surprise attack from inside the headquarters, and although Edward and others successfully sneaked underground from the Third Research Institute, the entire episode is the contents only describe the activity routes of the personnel of each party separately. There are no fierce battle scenes or super deployments such as reinforcements coming from the sky like before. Therefore, although the content of this chapter once again won the first place and completed the rhythm of killing, Yoshida has already begun to worry about the content of the next chapter. Hey! Yachin Mumenha and Hattori did a good job. Looking at the rankings in the reader survey, Yoshida frowned a little. The gap between the support rate of PCP rank 2nd and Steel was not big. Yoshida, who had noticed the abnormality before, naturally also paid attention to Ajumumenha's comics. Yoshida already had an ominous premonition about the adventurous way chosen by the Good Friends duo, but he didn't expect it to come true this time. You can win. When the solution chapter comes out, you can definitely win. Unlike Yoshida's frown, after learning the specific results, Kaito Hattori showed a confident smile like Ajumumenha. Continue like this, with let's decide the outcome. After the massacre is ended, the super killing has to start all over again. It's very troublesome. Unlike the worried Yoshida, Takahashi Makoto on the phone still maintained a relaxed attitude, with a strange look on his face. Smiling, my beloved cats, didn't you say what you said before? Let them lose some water first, and then slap them to death with a slap in the face. Didn't you veto it before? Now you're using this excuse. Hearing Takahashi Makoto say this, Yoshida really wanted to slap himself. Acheng, is there really no problem with the next chapter? Man. This is the contract signed by Phoenix Academy Kuma and all the cartoonists. Makoto Takahashi stopped painting, with a confident smile on his face. Whether it is a demon king or an overlord, since I am a king, I must be careful comply with the contract. My beloved cat, you can rest in peace after witnessing that I have become the overlord. This is a secret update, he. I didn't expect it. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A middle school cartoonist. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 149. Oh, what a jokey sensei said about PCP this time is so interesting. I didn't expect the ending to be like this. It's such a wonderful talk, with this tone of voice, it goes without saying that it's Eiji Shinzuma. Eiji, who was dancing barefoot on the floor, was holding a sample of the new issue of Shonen Jump in her hand, with a look of happiness on her face. Sure enough, teacher Akinmu is very good at talking about this type of comics. Combined with the layout of the previous chapters, the touching degree of this chapter, I can't say enough. Then Nyaizuma-kun, I have a question to ask you. Seeing Nyaizuma Eiji's excitement, Yojiro showed a flattering smile on his face. It's the PCP of Ajuma Menha. Can it surpass? Is the Phoenix Academy really fierce in steel? Humph. Nyaizuma Eiji jumped on the back of the chair, his body kept shaking with the chair. After pondering for a moment, he turned around and returned to the chair with difficult movements, matching the strange sounds of various strange creatures. Start drawing comics. Well, Yojiro did not question his new wife Eiji's behavior, but waited patiently for the answer. There is a consensus among the editorial department that the cartoonist named Eiji Nyaizuma has the extraordinary ability to predict the future in comics. When it comes to comparisons of manga rankings, Eiji Nyaizuma seems to have not made any mistakes. Writing this, I hope readers will remember our domain name Taiwan Novel Network Rightward Arrow. We can't win. We can't win at all, Little Crow-chan. Eiji Nyaizuma was drawing, then suddenly stopped painting and entered a sluggish state. Oh. Mummy Crow is about to transform. This is what I said. Steel refining, shocking and wonderful. Teacher Phoenix Academy is so awesome. Oh, it's flying, Little Crow-chan. Is that so? This chapter of Steel is indeed very exciting, but... Yojiro was still a little unwilling, staring at his new wife Eiji from behind. After hesitating for a while, he couldn't help but ask, then, can Crow win? Yojiro, are you an idiot? Eiji Nyaizuma continued to draw comics, mocking Yojiro mercilessly while drawing. Of course Crow can win. It's just that it can't be done. Now we can only witness. Steel remained at the top of the list until it was finished. It's interesting to say, let's go to the army of crows. Can you win? Can't you do it? Looking at his new wife Eiji, who stopped talking, Yojiro took the drawing and left thoughtfully. Because it's too late. Listening to the sound of the door being closed, Nyaizuma Eiji drew heavily on the manuscript paper, with an expectant look on his face, and muttered to himself, Phoenix Academy teacher, it's really something that Crow can do in the future, but this time it was taken first. Although the two comics were not publicly compared, several cartoonists who knew about it were quietly waiting for the results. However, as the person involved, Akin Mumanjai's face looked a little ugly at the moment. The sample magazine in his hand had begun to deform due to the nervous pressure of his palm. This episode of Steel Refining put Akin Mumanjai and two people under tremendous pressure. In this chapter of Steel, the headquarters released the undead army at the beginning. These puppets injected with the Philosopher's Stone quickly killed all the living people in sight, and finally met Edward, who had sneaked into the research institute. The others met and started fighting. The Snow Queen was also trapped by the sudden appearance of the artificial man. Although she had the help of her younger brother, she was still in a tough fight. Zhang Mei, who had been preparing to return to the new country, under the provocation and instigation of the insect body Envy, he returned to the city again, and Envy also regained his strong fighting ability by devouring the undead army of puppets. Even Al, who was talked about by many readers before and sacrificed himself. Here, because of the sudden appearance of Kim Bree, he severely injured Uncle Lion Synthetic Beast with one blow and freed the imprisoned Pride. If the content of the previous chapter was used for layout, then the content of this chapter, called the Phoenix Academy Jujhen Manga Artist, has arranged corresponding opponents for the protagonists who will act separately. There are many characters in Steel. Like many royal comics, the combatants on the protagonist's side will always encounter designated opponents. This is the legendary Fate and the so-called Old Enemy. After seeing this, many readers have already guessed part of the content of Steel, the battle between Edward and others against the undead puppet army, the battle between the Snow Queen and the big android, but readers also have some doubts. I'm confused. If Zhang Mei and Enwei don't consider it for the time being, how can Al and Pride break it? In the previous serialized content, many readers have a very intuitive understanding of Pride's power. The existence that Edward and the artificial Glid could not defeat now have a powerful helper. On Al's side, although Al is stronger than Edward in terms of strength, facing Pride and Kimberly together they still have no chance of winning. What's more, there is a seriously injured synthetic beast uncle. When Al wanted to rescue the synth beast uncle, Pride used shadows to entangle his legs. Although many readers kept complaining about Pride's ability, saying that this was a unique skill of a genius ninja, but when they saw this, readers couldn't help but worry. Especially after seeing Al put his hands together and launched alchemy, readers held their breath and prepared to see how Al would fight back next. However, in the comics, Al did not launch a sharp counterattack, but deliberately blew off his legs in order to get rid of Pride's control. This approach made many readers stunned at first, and then their favorability soared. Many readers are sighing that Al is a kind child after all. Facing a powerful enemy, he didn't think about how to escape or how to deal with it, but the first thing he thought of was to rescue his seriously injured companions. Even if his movements were restricted, he put saving people first. Al lost his legs, let alone saving people, he couldn't even move normally. But in this situation, Al created an explosion through alchemy, causing dust and smoke to cover the side of the android and Kimberly, and slowly dragged the synthman uncle to move. Al, who cherished his life, shocked many readers. "If you leave me alone, you may be saved." The synthman uncle also understood that he, who was seriously injured, had become a burden to Al, and tried several times to persuade Al to give up himself and escape alone. "I said no," Al also refused several times. "Don't think about these useless things, just think about how to survive now." Stupid. Look at the reality, the persuasion of the synthman uncle sounded the most advantageous judgment. After all, as Kimberly's subordinate, he knew Kimberly's strength very well. In addition, he had fought with Pride before, and naturally felt deeply about Pride's strength and cruelty. The opponent is Kimberly and Pride. Ahem, leave me behind. Don't give up, I will definitely save you. How can you give up at this time? You brothers you are obviously already covered in wounds, why are you still thinking about saving others? The words of the synth uncle reminded many readers of the content that Edward insisted on using alchemy to rescue the synth uncle from the predicament of being crushed by heavy objects when he was seriously injured. The seriously injured synth uncle in the comics, with Al's repeated persuasion, the strong will to survive was also awakened. He took out the Philosopher's Stone from his pocket, gave it to the shocked Al, and explained the origin of the Philosopher's Stone. The Philosopher's Stone, if you really have it, you may win, but... Looking at the words that Al did not finish in the comics, many readers have already thought of it. Ah, I know, this is made of human life. You want to restore your original body, but you don't want to use this. I have heard your thoughts from your eldest brother. In this case, don't use it for yourself, but use it to protect the world. Even though they have turned into stones like this, you still recognize that they are human lives, so I can entrust them to you. I can understand, no matter what they become, they want to fight to protect precious things, so let them join the battle. I understand. In the comics, the handover process of the Philosopher's Stone was not drawn, but Al held his hands and said, "Let's fight together." The words have made readers understand Al's choice. Al's respect for life, this concept instantly raised this episode of Full Metal Alchemist to a higher level. The comics turned to the conversation between Kimberly and Pride. Kimberly suggested using an explosion to blow away the smoke, but Pride refused. Kimberly thought Al would escape, but Pride said that Al could not escape because Al had lost his armored legs. Readers who know the plot naturally know that Al's choice is not to escape, but to fight to the end. When alchemy is activated, lines similar to lightning will always appear in the comics. In the picture of thick smoke, countless lightnings are flying. The comics give a close-up, Al is in good health, and slowly walks out of the thick smoke, and with the lightning when alchemy is activated, many readers are very excited. This is really, don't say it's running away. A close-up of a face that is almost distorted interprets Kimberly's character. Facing Al, who has the courage to fight, Kimberly gave an extremely excited evaluation. Great. It's great, Alphonse Elric. The last picture of this comic stayed in the scene where Al stood in the thick smoke. Although Al has always appeared in the form of armor, Al's expression is generally not visible, but in the last comic draft, many readers can feel Al's strong will to fight. Although the manga is stuck here, unlike before, many readers did not complain about the plot being stuck in the Phoenix Court as usual after reading this chapter. After all, the content of this chapter, apart from the multi-line plot development in the previous part, just the content in the second half, the existence of Al, has moved readers. Whether it is the determination to stay with a seriously injured companion when facing a strong enemy, or the respect for life, or the perseverance and courage in the face of a strong enemy, in this episode, Al's outstanding performance conquered the hearts of most Full Metal Alchemist fans. The result this time, that did our plan fail? Listening to the hesitant tone of the sea urchin-headed Hattori on the other end of the phone, the yellow-haired glasses man who answered the phone already knew the result. After hanging up the phone with some disappointment, the yellow-haired glasses man and Landai, the good friends, lay on the sofa with their heads raised, with the same disappointed expressions on their faces. When I saw this episode of Full Metal Alchemist before, Yashiro Mumenjai and the two had vaguely guessed that this would be the result, but when they really faced it, it was still a little hard to accept. Some people are happy and some are sad. Just when Yashiro Mumenjai was disappointed, Yashida was very happy. This can also be regarded as an equal exchange, right? Ah-Cheng, this episode won first place. Really? Yashida shouted happily on the other end of the phone, but Takahashi Makoto felt annoyed and completely ignored Yashida, who was immersed in joy, and hung up the phone directly. Ah-Cheng, the result is. As an assistant of Full Metal Alchemist, Takahashi Makoto did not hide the previous events from the two, so Lee Binjin and Ueno Aoi were naturally very concerned about the result. However, seeing Takahashi Makoto's gloomy expression, the two thought that Takahashi Makoto had lost. After looking at each other, they began to comfort each other. It's okay, Cheng, the content of the next chapter will definitely get first place. So. My name is Feng Guangai Yuan Kuma, a ghost from a parallel world, who will return this world to chaos. The irrelevant answer made the two assistants sluggish, and Takahashi Makoto continued to say nonchalantly, first. Next chapter? This kind of thing is meaningless to me. You vain human beings, what I desire is to make all the people in the world my slaves, what I hope is to make the whole world my plaything. Ha 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 ha. I updated one more chapter, but it was lost in the collection. It's really magical. A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 150. With the recent serialization of Full Metal Alchemist, many readers have gradually realized that this comic, which has been full of ups and downs recently, is about to end. Many readers have very conflicting thoughts. They hope that Full Metal Alchemist can continue to be drawn, but they also hope that the Edward brothers can find a way to recover their bodies without sacrificing anyone as soon as possible. This contradictory psychology has gradually deepened with the recent frequent battles in the comics. There were also magazines reviewing anime before, trying to obtain relevant spoiler information about Full Metal Alchemist by interviewing the cartoonist Hao Wing-kuma, but unfortunately, the cartoonist named Hao Wing-kuma is a terminal patient of Shuyunibu. Therefore, the result of the interview was that helium atoms were flying everywhere in the sky. Damn, there really is such a thing as the Philosopher's Stone. Looking at the information provided by a certain guerrilla search engine on the internet, Yekwon was shocked. I thought it was Hao Wing-kuma, this card drama devil made up something at will, but I didn't expect it to really exist. Yes, as a die-hard fan of Full Metal Alchemist, Yekwon is obsessed with Full Metal Alchemist to a crazy degree. As for the fictional Philosopher's Stone in the comics, he even started searching online for the manufacturing method, process, and use of the Philosopher's Stone. Of course, the content in the comics is naturally fictional, and in reality, the description of the Philosopher's Stone is completely a pseudoscientific legend. So classmate Yekwon, in addition to being dizzy by the complicated names of foreign friends, did not get any valuable information. The reason why Yekwon searched for the Philosopher's Stone online is still because of the previously released serialized Full Metal Alchemist. Although Kimberly is a human, he has an extraordinary state of mind. According to the settings of many kingly comics, any existence with a strong heart, even if its own ability is weak, will burst out at a critical moment as powerful as a halo. What's more, Kimberly is called the Red Lotus Alchemist, and in terms of its combat power, it has surpassed many people. And Pride's strength is also obvious to many readers, and his powerful ability has long been deeply rooted in the hearts of the people. But in the comics, Al told Uncle Synthesizer that with the help of the Philosopher's Stone, it would be possible to defeat Pride, who joined forces with Kimberly. Many readers are thinking, can this situation of obvious superiority and inferiority in combat power be changed by just a Philosopher's Stone? With expectations and doubts, the content of the new episode is finally released. There is no delay, and there is no pre-war verbal canon and mutual ridicule. The comics start with a fierce battle. For such a development, Yekwon's face is full of expectations. After taking a deep breath, he began to read the comics. Al, holding the Philosopher's Stone, launched a surprise attack on Kimberly and Pride. With the explosion launched by alchemy, dust and smoke filled the battlefield, covering the local site, and then Al first attacked Kimberly. The continuous pursuit put Kimberly in a hard battle. Even if Kimberly launched alchemy in the middle and used a strong fire explosion to counterattack, it was easily resolved by Al with the Philosopher's Stone. As the neglected Pride, seeing Al blindly attacking Kimberly, he naturally would not give up such an opportunity. He controlled the shadow tentacles and directly cut off Al's armored arm. After seeing this scene, Yekwon couldn't help but worry, and at the same time, he was a little angry that Al was too hot-blooded and only focused on attacking and forgot about defense. But the following series of battle comics made Yekwon feel the power of the Philosopher's Stone. Al, who lost his armored arm, quickly refined a new armored arm with the Philosopher's Stone in his hand, and threw Pride to his armor parts, and directly used alchemy to refine a sharp sword. Although Al also wanted to imitate Hohenheim and use alchemy to refine a rock cage to trap Pride, like the Saint Seiya, the same trick was ineffective. Pride, who noticed Al's intention, easily chopped the rock cage into pieces. Oh my god, the Philosopher's Stone is really... A series of battle patterns made Yekwon hold his breath and concentrate. Without any extra drawings, the intense and tense battle was fully expressed. Especially when he saw in the comics that Al relied on a small piece of the Philosopher's Stone to fight against two people, Yekwon now had a truly intuitive understanding of the power of the Philosopher's Stone. After Al's plan was discovered by Pride, he was strongly counterattacked by Pride. The armored arm and armored helmet were pierced by the black shadow tentacles. The scene that was difficult to resolve before turned to a disadvantage in an instant, which made Yekwon stunned. What happened to the previous sky-breaking combat power? Why did he fall into such a disadvantageous situation in just a moment? Worry and doubt made Yekwon impatient to turn to the next page of the comics. Al used the Philosopher's Stone to make a flash bomb, but Pride seemed to have noticed it and destroyed the flash bomb that had just been made. The black shadow tentacles split the flash bomb that Al had abandoned into two. Seeing this, Yekwon sighed helplessly. It seemed that using a flash bomb to deal with Pride was no longer feasible. Was it a dead end now? However, Al did not give up. A real flash bomb suddenly appeared from underground. Under the strong light, Pride's shadow tentacles were completely destroyed, and Al also seized this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, quickly activated alchemy, and trapped Pride with a conical stone pillar. The Philosopher's Stone is indeed well deserved. Because I have used it, I know it very well. In the comics, Kimberly was not in a hurry to free Pride, but asked Al his own questions. But I don't understand. Why don't you use the power of the Philosopher's Stone to restore your body? If you have the Philosopher's Stone, you can easily get rid of us, and then find a place to use the Philosopher's Stone. She restores the bodies of you two brothers, won't your journey be over? Regarding the question that puzzled Kimberly, Yekwon could understand somewhat, because Brother Edward had been traveling non-stop in order to find a way to restore his body without sacrificing anyone. But, looking at the serious face of Kimberly in the comics, Yekwon suddenly became curious about this character. Generally speaking, as a villain, at some critical moment, he will stop his killing blow, taunt the protagonist's side, or enter the dark memory killing, etc., only to be suddenly exploded by the protagonist's side. Get rid of it? These scenes often appear in many comic novels, and Yekwon has become accustomed to them. Seeing Kimberly suddenly stop fighting and asking Al. Although this behavior is just a sidekick, it still triggers certain death flags from before. Yekwon said that he had seen it, and Kimberly had embarked on a branch called Death. But the subsequent conversation between Kimberly and Al in the comic made many readers, including Yekwon, feel Kimberly's evil and crazy charm. We can't save everyone, this is necessary. If you want to get something, you have to give something. I said, why do you have to choose one of the two? Regarding Kimberly's remarks, Al showed the idealistic side of being a good and lawful camp, restore the original body and save everyone at the same time. I can only choose the same thing, it's so strange. Why is there no way to restore the body and save everyone at the same time? Seeing this, Yekwon naturally nodded and admitted. The happy ending has become a fundamental setting in many comics and novels. Although such an unsuspicious result has been guessed and seen through by readers, it is undeniable that human beings have always appealed and longed for it. Because of dissatisfaction with reality, they put their dreams in fantasy products, hence the name human existence can only escape but cannot face difficulties and setbacks. After all, it is a cowardly species. I see, if it can be realized, it can become a new truth and be recognized by the world. Is that what it is? Kimberly did not laugh at Al's naive ideal, but thought about Al's ideas thoughtfully. After speaking, he sat on a rock and said, then there is another possibility, you have neither recovered your body, nor have you any choice to be saved. You should also consider it. Kimberly also hid a Philosopher's Stone. Taking advantage of Al's distracted moment, he used alchemy to create an explosion, which not only destroyed the advantage Al had previously established, but also released Pride, who had been imprisoned by Al come out. The collision of powerful wills can actually produce such beautiful music. Facing the mess after the explosion, Kimberly said with a cheerful smile. Seeing this development, Yekwon was not only worried, but also curious about the meaning of Jin Buli's existence. Although the comic only gave a side view of Kimberly, the smile on Kimberly's face made Yekwon feel a complete chill. Looking at Kimberly's lines in the comics, Yekwon felt a deep sense of fear. I don't know what I'm afraid of, but just imagining Kimberly standing in front of me makes my body tremble involuntarily. It wasn't until this moment that Yekwon realized that Jin Buli had no intention of helping anyone, but was standing in the absolutely neutral camp. In the previous episode where Kimbri appeared, Mustang's teacher once said that alchemy should be a technology that benefits mankind. However, with the beginning of the Ishval Annihilation War, the alchemist's strong intervention turned this technology that was supposed to bring happiness to people into a synonym for destruction and destruction. Kimbri, on the other hand, transformed into a destroyer, and brought the disaster caused by gold alchemy to the extreme. Whether it was the killer on the battlefield of Ishval, the battle during the pursuit of Scar, or the current battle with Al, Kimbri did not completely defect to any side, but watched as an observer. Stay tuned and witness all developments with respect. Kimbri may be the only person in metal who stands neither on the side of humans nor on the side of artificial beings. This man who makes people feel evil at first glance always appears in a white dress, intoxicated in his own beliefs and abandoning everything else. However, even such a being never laughs at other people's beliefs. Faced with Al's almost naive idea, Kimbri did not ridicule, but made a reasonable analysis and put forward his own idea. This Kimbri is really... I don't know what words to use to evaluate it. For the role of Kimbri, only half of the performance of this episode made Yekwon put down the comic in his hand and fell into a sluggish state. "Hey Chen, what are you doing?" Seeing Takahashi Chen inputting some words quickly in front of the computer, Lee Byung-yin, as an assistant, was a little curious. He stretched his head and looked at it with a look of surprise on his face. "Create an entry for the Philosopher's Stone." "Wait, there seems to be something wrong with this description." "Humph. Brother Muse, it seems you don't know that legend." After Takahashi Makoto finished typing the last word, he showed a nostalgic look on his face. The explanation of the entry about the Leo Wizard back then was a rare masterpiece of the association. Leo Wizard? What is that? He had no idea what Takahashi Makoto was talking about, but Lee Binjian's intuition told him that it was definitely something that was out of common sense. The dark side of a certain unscrupulous and conscienceless alphabet club. Takahashi Makoto lowered his head in frustration, and fell into some unbearable past events. "That's right, it was the summer when I was 8 years old, and it was just released. I'm going to work." After watching Takahashi Makoto enter the second-year memory killing, Lee Binjian shrugged helplessly and immediately planned to leave the battle. Maha, the great guardian who spanned 3,000 years of time, could have evolved into a higher level of existence, but because Takahashi Makoto stopped talking about a dark past, because he noticed the betrayal of his believer Lee Binjian, and a suspected black smile appeared on his face. "How dare you betray Lord Feng Guangai Yuan Xiongzhen? Brother Muse, the person you are dating is..." Lee Binjian teleported to Takahashi Makoto at a speed beyond human speed and covered the devil's mouth. He shook his head silently, with a look of pleading in his eyes, which made the assistants who were watching on the side fall into strange contemplation. "Tisk," Takahashi Makoto slapped his hand off his mouth unhappily, stared at Lee Binjian with his right eye, and after a long silence, he asked in a low voice, "So, has the successor been determined? Who will be the next person to become the contractor of my Feng Guangai Yuan Xiongzhen? Let's make it clear first, aliens, superpowers, magicians, creatures from other worlds, all of these are acceptable, but ordinary humans, refuse. I like the manga Full Metal Alchemist very much, so I spent a lot of time to write and analyze it. Maybe you adults feel that it is a bit dragged and a bit watery. If so, I am very sorry to say the above.